They threw an old ranch maid into the snow for opening a barn door to a wounded stranger and his loyal canine, never guessing the quiet man she helped had once led Navy SEAL teams and now held the debt that could take their whole empire. By sunrise, Mercy would return to Cedar Draw Ranch, wearing muddy boots, a torn sling, and a German shepherd who remembered every lie. The first snow of November came softly over Paradise Valley. Not as a storm at first, but as a warning whispered across the yellow grass and the dark ribs of the Absaroka Range. At Cedar Draw Ranch, the horses knew it before the men did. They shifted in their stalls and breathed clouds into the dim barn, tapping their hooves against the planks as if the ground itself had grown uncertain. Evelyn Parker heard them from the kitchen, where she was scraping supper gravy from an iron pan that had been old when her knees were young. She was 68 years old, though she never said the number unless a doctor cornered her with a clipboard. Her silver hair was pinned with 2 bent hairpins. Her blue cotton dress was faded almost gray at the elbows, and her brown wool cardigan smelled faintly of wood smoke, flour, and the lavender soap she bought once a year in Livingston when she had enough coins left after postage. She had worked at Cedar Draw for 11 years, rising before the rooster had made up his mind, and lying down after the last ranch hand had stopped pretending he would clean his own plate. The room she slept in was a narrow space above the pantry, with a ceiling so low she had learned to bow her head before she forgot why. Evelyn did not mind bowing her head. She had bowed it in church over wash tubs beside hospital beds, and once over a folded flag she could not bring herself to touch for several minutes because touching made things real. On the shelf above the kitchen stove sat a small tin box that had once held peppermint candy. Now it held letters from her son Daniel, a brass button from his Marine dress blues, a dried navy bean, and a photograph of him laughing with his eyes half closed because the sun had been in his face. The bean was her own foolish ritual. Whenever she prayed for someone to make it home, she placed a bean on a sill or a rail, something small and plain that looked like nothing to anyone else. If the person came back, she put the bean in the tin. If they did not, she buried it under the cottonwood by the creek. She had buried too many. That evening, with snow floating past the kitchen window and Clifford Hayes shouting from the dining room about ledgers, cattle weights, and the price of hay, Evelyn took 1 dried bean from the cracked saucer near the flour bin and rolled it between her fingers. She did not yet know whom she was praying for. That was the strange part. Sometimes the prayer came before the person. She set the bean on the windowsill above the sink and said, "Lord, whoever it is, do not let them be alone tonight." The words had barely left her mouth when a sound came from the direction of the barn. It was not the horses. Horses complained like old judges, and frightened cabs bawled like children who had lost a mitten. This sound was low, deliberate, and so full of effort that Evelyn set the pan down without rinsing it. A dog. Not barking. Trying not to bark. She pulled her shawl from the peg, took the lantern from beside the pantry door, and stepped into the yard before her good sense could put on its boots and stop her. The cold hit her cheeks with a clean slap. Snow gathered on the shoulders of her cardigan. Across the yard, the barn lantern had gone out, leaving only a black square against the pale weather. Evelyn frowned. Wade Mercer, the ranch foreman, was supposed to check the barn lamps after supper, but Wade believed chores were something men invented for widows and old women to finish. She crossed the yard with her boots sinking into the thin white crust, her breath rising in little clouds. Halfway there, she heard the dog again, closer now, from behind the feed shed. The sound was not a plea. It was a warning shaped by pain. "Easy now," she called, keeping her voice low. "I have never won an argument with a dog in my life, and I do not plan to start tonight." The answer was a rumble deep and controlled. She lifted the lantern. At first she saw only snow-stacked hay, the shadow of the water trough. Then the light caught 2 eyes. A German shepherd lay beside the barn wall, sable-coated, with a black saddle dark as wet coal. His right ear torn along the edge, his muzzle already touched with gray. One back leg was tucked awkwardly under him, but his head was up and his gaze was steady. Between his front paws and the barn wall lay a man. Evelyn stopped so fast the lantern chain clicked. He was large, broad through the shoulders, even under a torn canvas jacket, with dark hair matted by snow and mud, and one arm drawn close to his body, as if every inch of movement cost him. His flannel shirt had been ripped at the shoulder. There were signs enough of a hard encounter, though Evelyn did not let her eyes linger on the details. She had seen injured men before, in hospitals and on roadsides, and once in her own kitchen, when Daniel had come home from training with a smile too bright for his bruises. What mattered was not the sight of hurt. What mattered was whether anyone still had time to answer it. The dog shifted, placing himself between Evelyn and the man. His lips lifted just enough to show he knew the law of his own body and would enforce it if she came too fast. "That is fair," Evelyn said. "If my boy had been lying there, I would have bitten first and asked questions at breakfast." The man's eyes opened a fraction. Gray-blue alert despite the feverish shine. "Do not touch the dog," he said, his voice rough as a rope pulled over stone. "Was not planning on dancing with him," Evelyn replied. "You, however, are lying in my snow." The man's mouth twitched, almost not enough to be called a smile. "Your snow? I scrub this ranch's pots. That entitles me to a small share of weather." She took one careful step closer, then another, watching the dog. The shepherd growled again, not louder, just clearer. Evelyn crouched slowly, her knees objecting in language she ignored, and set the lantern on the ground. From her apron pocket she took the honey biscuit she had been saving for after dishes. It was hard at the edges, shaped badly and sweet enough to make the dentist in Livingston sigh from miles away. She broke it in half and laid one piece in the snow, then pushed it forward with 2 fingers. "There," she said. "No speeches, no tricks, just poor baking." The dog sniffed. His eyes stayed on her. Then, with great dignity, he picked up the biscuit and swallowed it whole. "Well," Evelyn said, "you are either desperate or polite." The man exhaled something that might have been a laugh if pain had not caught it halfway. "Atlas." "That his name?" "Yes." "A proud name for a biscuit thief." Atlas lowered his head, not in trust exactly, but in permission. Evelyn took it. She edged closer to the man and touched 2 fingers to his wrist. His pulse was fast. Too fast. His skin was cold where it should have been warm, and too warm where it should have been cool. His left shoulder needed care. His ribs were troubling him, and the way he guarded his side told her he had taken punishment he did not care to describe. She did not ask. A woman who had worked kitchens her whole life understood that people told the truth more easily when you did not shine a lamp in their eyes. "Can you stand?" she asked. "Not well." "That is not the question, but it is an honest answer." Behind her, the back door of the main house slammed. Men's voices spilled into the yard. Clifford Hayes came first, buttoning his sheepskin coat over his heavy belly, his face already flushed with irritation. Wade Mercer followed with a rifle resting in the crook of his arm and a thin, pleased look on his face, as if trouble were a meal he had ordered and expected to enjoy. Clifford owned Cedar Draw Ranch by paper and banknote, though Evelyn sometimes wondered whether fear owned it more truly. He was 59, red-eyed from late nights and whiskey, with a trimmed beard that made him look respectable from a distance and meaner up close. He liked clean ledgers, obedient workers, and the sound of his own boots on a porch. "What is going on out here?" Clifford shouted. "Evelyn, step back from that man!" She did not move. "He needs a doctor." Wade raised the lantern he carried and swore under his breath. "That is the drifter from the north fence. I told you he was trouble, boss." The man on the ground closed his eyes, not from weakness but from recognition. Atlas lifted his head and stared at Wade with a stillness that made the air tighten. "A drifter with a dog trained better than half the hands you hire," Evelyn said. "He is hurt." "He is not our concern," Clifford snapped. "No water, no blankets, no medicine. Whoever did that to him can come looking somewhere else." The word that came into Evelyn's mind was not fit for prayer, so she swallowed it and chose another. "Mercy is cheaper than a funeral. Do not preach at me in my own yard." Clifford stepped closer, snow crunching under his polished boots. "We have cattle missing fences, cut, creditors breathing down my neck, and men asking for wages I cannot print out of frost. I will not have some armed stray and his war dog bringing county law or worse to my ranch." The injured man said nothing. Atlas did. A low sound. Wade's mouth curled. "Dog has sense enough to know he is not welcome." Evelyn turned her head just slightly. "Wade, the day I ask you to measure sense, I will fetch a cup small enough to hold it." One of the younger hands near the porch coughed into his sleeve. Clifford's face darkened. "Careful, old woman." "I am being careful. That is why I am telling you we must get him into the barn, warm him, give him water, and send for Deputy Whitcomb or Dr. Ames." "No law," Clifford said too quickly. Evelyn heard it. So did the man on the ground, though he kept his eyes closed. "Then the doctor." "No doctor." Clifford pointed toward the road. "Wade will haul him beyond the south gate. If he lives, he lives. If he does not, that is between him and the God you keep dragging into my business." A little hush followed. Snow landed on Evelyn's eyelashes and melted there. She looked at the man at Atlas at the barn door hanging crooked on one hinge. She thought of Daniel at 19, sunburned and grinning beside a training pool, writing, "Mama." Some men pretend they are not scared because nobody taught them what to do with fear. She thought of the bean on the kitchen sill. "No," she said. Clifford stared at her. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice did not rise. It did not have to. Age had taken some things from Evelyn Parker, but it had left her with a tone that could settle over a room like a quilt or a court order. "He is coming into the barn. If you touch him again, you are finished here." Clifford's voice dropped colder than the snow. "You sleep under my roof. You eat my food. You wear out my patience and call it Christian duty. I have let you stay because my late wife liked your biscuits and because you work cheap. Do not mistake habit for value." The words found soft places. Evelyn felt them. Of course she did. Cruel words often knew where to stand. She saw very clearly the small pantry room that would no longer be hers, the shelf where Daniel's letters sat, the coffee tin where she saved coins, the winter road to Livingston. Her body was tired, her hands ached. She had no family waiting with a fire. Then Atlas shifted closer to the injured man and laid his muzzle across the man's sleeve, as if holding him to the world. Evelyn bent, slid her arm under the man's good shoulder and said, "Sir, I do not know your name, but I need you to help me prove my back has not retired without notice." The man opened his eyes. Something like respect moved through them. "Nathan," he whispered. "Nathan Brooks. Evelyn Parker. The dog has already introduced himself by stealing supper." Nathan tried to push himself upright. He nearly failed. She steadied him with both hands while Luke Harper, the quiet farrier who had been watching from the shadow of the tack room, stepped forward before courage could change its mind. Luke was 52, lean and limping from an old army injury, a man who carried silence around like a tool belt. "I can help her get him inside," Luke said. Clifford rounded on him. "You can get back to your quarters!" Luke looked at Evelyn, then at the dog, then at Wade's rifle. Shame flickered across his face, old and familiar. He took one step back, not far, but enough. Evelyn did not blame him. Fear made prisoners of decent people every day. She and Nathan moved slowly, inch by inch, through the barn door. Atlas followed close, leaning too much on his sore leg but refusing to be left. Wade muttered that the animal ought to be locked in the shed. Atlas bared his teeth without making a sound. Evelyn said, "Try it and I will tell everyone in church you got outthought by a dog." The young hand coughed again. Clifford lifted a finger toward her. "Pack before sunrise. 1 bag, nothing from my stores. You will leave by the south road." Evelyn helped Nathan down into clean straw near the far stall where the wind did not reach. "My wages are 2 weeks behind," she said without looking up. "Your wages are for workers who obey." "Then I will consider tonight charity in reverse." Clifford's jaw worked. He wanted to shout. Men like him liked shouting because it made the world simple. But something in the barn had changed. The horses were quiet. Luke had not gone back to his quarters. Rosa Martinez, the young cook who helped Evelyn when her boy's asthma allowed her to take extra shifts, stood in the kitchen doorway with one hand pressed to her chest. Wade looked from face to face and saw that the old woman had cracked the surface of something. Not broken it, not yet, but cracked it. Clifford hated cracks. "Sunrise," he said. "If you are still here, Wade will escort you out with whatever manners you deserve." He turned and stalked back toward the house. Wade lingered. His gaze dropped to Atlas's collar, where mud and snow hit a small metal tag. For one sharp second, Evelyn saw interest wake in his face. Nathan saw it too. His fingers moved weakly toward the dog. Wade smiled without warmth, then followed Clifford into the snow. The barn doors groaned closed behind him. For a long moment, Evelyn heard only the horses breathing and the tick of cooling metal from the lantern. Then her own hands began to shake. She pressed them into her apron until they stopped. "Well," she said, "that was a lively end to Tuesday." Nathan leaned back against the post, pale beneath the dirt. "You should not have done that." "Men keep telling me that after I do things. It has never improved the past." She fetched water from the covered barrel, or strips from a clean flour sack she had bought herself, and set a bowl near Atlas first. The dog sniffed it, then looked to Nathan for permission. Nathan nodded. Atlas drank, careful and slow. "Good manners," Evelyn said. "Better than Wade's, though. That is a fence so low a beetle could jump it." Nathan closed his eyes while she worked around the worst of his injuries, with a gentleness that came from practice, not softness. She did not ask who had hurt him. She did not ask why he wore an old tactical belt under a ranch coat. She did not ask why a dog with military bearing watched every corner of the barn like it had names. Instead, she asked, "Do you have people in town?" "Some." "Can they be trusted?" He opened his eyes. "Yes." "Can they arrive before sunrise?" "If I can reach them." That sounds like a chapter title, not a plan. Again, the almost smile. It made him look younger and sadder at the same time. "Atlas's collar," he said after a moment. "There is a tag under the mud. Unit number, contact code. If Wade sees it clearly, he will understand enough to panic." Evelyn stilled. Outside wind pressed snow against the barn wall. "Panic makes men sloppy," she said, "and cruel. Then we hide it." Atlas lifted his head when Evelyn reached toward him. Nathan whispered a command so soft she did not catch the word. The dog held still, though his eyes never left her face. Evelyn cleaned the collar with the corner of her apron, found the small metal tag, and carefully slipped it free. It was warmer than she expected from resting against the dog. She held it in her palm, feeling the engraved marks under her thumb, not a decoration, not a pet tag. Proof of a life of service that could not explain itself. She took Daniel's peppermint tin from her apron pocket because she had snatched it from the kitchen shelf on her way out without thinking. The Lord and old mothers both had habits of preparation. She opened it, moved the letters aside, and placed Atlas's tag beneath the photograph of her son. Nathan watched the motion, his face changing in a way she could not name. "Daniel," he asked, reading the name on the top letter. Evelyn closed the tin gently. "My boy." "Marine." Her throat tightened. "Yes." Nathan looked away toward the dark rafters. "I am sorry." She nodded once. Some condolences were coins worn smooth by too many hands. This one was not. This one had weight. "Rest now," she said, "if you can." "I have not been good at that for years." "Most folks are not good at the thing they need most." She spread her own quilt over him, ignoring the cold that found her shoulders afterward. Atlas settled against Nathan's side, still watching her. Evelyn reached into her apron and found the other half of the honey biscuit. She held it up. "Payment for guarding him while I fetch more water." Atlas stared, then placed his chin on Nathan's sleeve with solemn obedience. She gave him the biscuit. "You drive a hard bargain." Nathan's breathing eased by small degrees. The barn grew quiet except for the storm and the old sounds of animals trusting shelter. Evelyn sat on an overturned bucket beside them, hands folded back, aching future uncertain as a trail under fresh snow. In the main house, Clifford's windows burned yellow. Somewhere out there, Wade was likely thinking about the tag he had almost seen. Evelyn touched the tin in her apron pocket and thought of the bean on the kitchen windowsill. She had prayed for someone to come home. Now home itself had turned against her. Near midnight, Nathan stirred and reached weakly toward Atlas. The dog rose at once. "He will come back before dawn," Nathan whispered. "Who?" Evelyn asked. "Wade." His eyes opened clear and grave. "And if he finds what he is looking for, he will not just throw you out. He will make sure none of us reach Livingston." Evelyn looked toward the barn doors where snow blew in under the crack like pale smoke. She picked up the lantern, turned the flame low, and moved the peppermint tin deeper inside her dress pocket against her heart. Then she took one dried bean from the tin, placed it on the top rail of the stall beside Nathan and Atlas, and whispered, "Lord, I suppose you heard the man. We will need a bigger mercy than usual tonight." Before dawn, the barn at Cedar Draw Ranch seemed to hold its breath. Snow pressed softly against the roof, slid from the eaves in quiet sighs, and gathered in white drifts along the door where the wind had found every crack and made itself at home. Evelyn Parker sat on the overturned bucket with her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders, listening to Nathan Brooks sleep in shallow pieces rather than true rest. She had known men who slept like that. Daniel had done it on his last visit home before the accident that took him away from her, sitting upright in the kitchen chair because lying flat made him feel too vulnerable. He had smiled when she noticed, and told her the coffee was too good to waste on sleeping. Evelyn had pretended to believe him. Mothers learned many forms of mercy, and one of them was pretending not to see what pride could not bear to show. Atlas lay close against Nathan's good side, his sable coat rising and falling with careful breaths. One torn ear tips toward the barn doors. Every few minutes, the German shepherd opened his eyes, checked the shadows, checked Nathan, checked Evelyn, and returned his chin to his paws with the exhausted seriousness of a soldier still on watch after the war had ended. "You are going to wear a hole in the dark staring at it," Evelyn whispered. Atlas gave the smallest huff. "Do not take that tone with me. I have kept watch over fever, grief, church casseroles, and 3 different men named Earl who thought they knew how to carve a turkey. I am qualified." The dog blinked once, slow and unimpressed. Evelyn smiled despite the ache in her back. There was comfort in speaking to an animal who did not offer advice. On the stall rail above them sat the dried bean she had placed there with her prayer. It looked almost foolish in the lantern glow. Small, pale, ordinary. But Evelyn had learned that ordinary things could carry more weight than silver crosses and marble stones. A bean could mean somebody was still expected home. A folded letter could hold a voice. A dog tag hidden in a peppermint tin could turn a poor old woman's apron pocket into the safest vault in Montana, at least until morning. Nathan stirred, his face tightening before he woke. His hand moved first toward Atlas, then toward his left shoulder, then stopped as memory returned. His eyes opened. "How long?" "Not long enough to brag about." Evelyn poured water into a tin cup and helped him drink. "You slept like a man arguing with his dreams." "Did I speak?" "Only once. You said, 'Hold the line.' Then Atlas put his paw on your sleeve and you settled." Nathan looked at the dog. His expression softened so quickly it almost hurt to see. "He has heard worse from me. So have I from Clifford, and no one gives me a medal." Nathan breathed out carefully, avoiding a laugh that might trouble his ribs. "You always talk this much to wounded strangers? Only the lucky ones." She set the cup aside. "You told me Wade would come back. Why?" Nathan's gaze shifted to the barn door. The weariness in him did not disappear, but underneath it another version of the man surfaced, cold-eyed and exact. "Because he saw Atlas's collar. Not enough to read it, but enough to know there was something to read. Wade is not clever in the large ways. He cannot build a plan that lasts through weather. But he is sharp in the cruel small ways, and he knows when an object matters to someone." Evelyn touched the pocket where the tin rested. "The tag is safe. For now. That is the only kind of safe we get in this life." Nathan looked at her, then really looked the way a person does when gratitude and concern are standing in the same doorway. "You need to leave before he returns." "That would be tidy for you, would it?" "It would keep you out of this." "Sir, I was thrown out of this before I knew what this was." She reached for the folded flour sack strips, checked the bandage at his shoulder with careful fingers, and kept her tone plain. "You can tell me enough to keep me from stepping in the wrong hole, or you can keep your secrets and watch an old woman improvise. I warn you, I improvise with kitchen tools and scripture. Results vary." Atlas raised his head as if endorsing the statement. Nathan watched them both, and the corner of his mouth moved. "I am a retired Navy SEAL," he said. Evelyn's hands paused for half a second, then resumed their work. "I guessed some kind of service. You carry quiet like a rucksack." He swallowed. "Atlas was a military working dog. He served with me on my last deployments. He found things that saved lives. He found people no one else could reach. When he retired, I fought more paperwork for him than I ever fought for myself. Paperwork is where courage goes to be tested by dull knives." "Exactly." His eyes stayed on Atlas. "I started a company after I left the teams, security consulting first, then rescue work, then a foundation for retired canines and veterans who cannot explain why the grocery store feels like a battlefield." Evelyn said nothing. Outside somewhere beyond the barn, a loose chain tapped against a post. "Cedar Draw showed up in our books 3 months ago," Nathan continued. "Not as a client, as a debt. Clifford Hayes borrowed money through a chain of lenders, some clean, some not. My people bought a package of bad paper from a bank in Bozeman. Cedar Draw was inside it. At first it looked like a ranch failing from weather and mismanagement. Then cattle from neighboring operations began vanishing near the north fence. Ear tags were cut, brands altered, papers moved through shell buyers. Small enough each time to look like bad luck. Large enough over a year to ruin honest families." Evelyn felt the old kitchen anger rise in her, the kind that came when men in good coats found new ways to steal bread and call it business. "And Clifford, I suspected he was either part of it or being used by someone smarter." "Clifford is many things. Being used by someone smarter would not narrow the field much." Nathan almost smiled again. "I came in quiet. No name, no entourage. If I arrived as myself, every dirty ledger would vanish and every hired hand would suddenly love the truth. I needed to see the north fence, the old calving sheds, the canyon road. Atlas found the holding pen yesterday." His hand tightened gently in the dog's fur. "Wade and 2 men caught us before we could get word out." Evelyn lifted her eyes to his face. He had chosen his words carefully. No sharp detail, no spectacle. Just enough truth to show the shape of what had happened. She respected him for that. Pain did not need decoration. "They left you by the barn because they thought Clifford would dispose of the problem, or because Wade wanted to watch what Clifford would do." "That sounds like him." She tied off the bandage. "What did Atlas find?" Nathan closed his eyes for a beat, gathering strength. "A ledger packet in an oilskin wrap, temporary tags, a list of ranches, a schedule. I hid it before they reached us." Evelyn's heart tapped harder. "Where?" "Under a loose board in the foaling stall." Evelyn looked across the barn. The foaling stall had not been used in 2 years because Clifford said young stock were too expensive and hope was a luxury. Wade stored broken tack there now, along with feed sacks and his private laziness. "If Wade comes looking for the collar, he may look there too." "He may." "You are calm about that." "No. I am trained to keep my voice from telling the truth too loudly." That struck her. She thought of Daniel again, of the letters where the jokes grew bigger as the spaces between them grew darker. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron. "My son did that." Nathan looked at the peppermint tin in her pocket. Daniel Parker. He was a Marine. He was built like a fence post and sang hymns off-key to annoy me when I was frying eggs. He died during training, a night water exercise. There was a report and kind officers and a folded flag and enough words to cover a mountain without telling a mother how to climb it. She said it evenly. Years had taught her how to carry the sentence. They had not made it lighter. Nathan's expression changed again, a quiet recognition that did not intrude. "I am sorry," he said. "So am I." She took the tin out and opened it. The lantern light fell across Daniel's letters, the brass button, the hidden canine tag. "When he was little, he used to bring hurt birds to my porch. Half of them were only stunned. A few were beyond help, though he would argue with heaven about it. He would cup them in both hands and say, 'Mama, maybe it just needs a minute.' That boy gave the whole world one more minute." Atlas lifted his head and leaned forward, sniffing the tin. Evelyn held it lower. "This is not a snack." The dog sniffed again, gentler, then touched his nose to Daniel's photograph. Evelyn's throat closed in a way that surprised her. Nathan watched. "Atlas does that sometimes," he said softly. "With photos of handlers. Does he know? He knows enough. Maybe that is all any of us get." The barn settled around them. A horse blew air through its nose. Snow scratched at the door. Evelyn closed the tin and tucked it away. "You said you needed to reach your people." "There is a number on the tag. My attorney Mason Reed monitors the emergency line. If Clara Whitcomb is still the deputy in Livingston, he will contact her too. Clara is still deputy. She brings soup to the church pantry and can stare a liar out of his own boots. Good." Nathan shifted, then winced in spite of himself. Atlas rose instantly. Evelyn placed a hand near the dog's shoulder but did not touch. "He is not going anywhere until he can do it without falling over Mr. Atlas." The dog stared at her. "Yes, I know. You outrank me." Nathan whispered a command. Atlas sat, though resentment lived in every inch of him. Evelyn stood slowly and picked up the lantern. "I will fetch that packet from the foaling stall." "No!" Nathan's voice sharpened. "Too dangerous." "Everything is dangerous if you are old enough. Chairs, ice, men with opinions, flour sacks on high shelves. Evelyn!" It was the first time he said her name like a plea. She turned. "Do you trust me with the tag?" "Yes." "Then trust me with a loose board." She crossed the barn carefully, keeping the lantern low. The foaling stall smelled of dust, old leather, and mice. She set the lantern on a hook, moved 2 cracked bridles, and knelt with effort beside the board Nathan had described. Her fingers found the edge. It lifted just enough.
Beneath it lay a bundle wrapped in dark oilskin and tied with baling twine. She slid it free. Not heavy, but some burdens did not need weight to bend the back.
From outside came the crunch of boots in snow. Evelyn froze. Atlas did not bark. That frightened her more than barking would have. He stood silent, every line of him aimed at the barn door. Nathan pushed himself upright, face pale, one hand searching for something that was not there. "Lantern," he whispered. Evelyn pinched the flame down until the stall fell into shadow. The barn door opened a narrow crack. Cold air entered first, then Wade Mercer slipped inside, carrying no lantern this time, only a small pocket torch cupped in his hand. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed everyone weaker was asleep. Evelyn crouched in the foaling stall, oilskin packet pressed against her chest, knees screaming. Wade paused near Nathan and Atlas. Atlas lay down before Wade turned the light his way, but his ears stayed forward. Nathan had closed his eyes, his posture slack, playing at unconsciousness so well Evelyn felt a chill of admiration. Wade bent close. "You awake, Drifter?" he whispered. No answer. "Old woman thinks she saved you. She has always been stupid that way." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the packet. Wade reached toward Atlas's collar. The dog growled a sound low enough to belong to the earth. Wade snatched his hand back. "Easy, beast. I am not after your hide tonight." He straightened and swept the light along the barn floor. Evelyn pressed herself behind the hanging tack. Wade took 2 steps toward the foaling stall, then stopped. From outside came another sound, a door closing at the main house. A woman's voice called softly, "Wade, Mr. Hayes wants you." Rosa. Bless that girl. Wade cursed under his breath. "Tell him I am checking the stock." "He said now." Rosa's voice wobbled, but held. Wade stood in the dark, thinking. Evelyn did not breathe. At last he turned and slipped back out, closing the door behind him. Only when his boots faded did Atlas move. He crossed the barn on 3 careful legs and pushed his nose under the tack, directly to Evelyn. "Show off," she whispered, because if she said anything tender, she might cry. Nathan exhaled. "You have the packet." Evelyn held it up. "I have the packet, a cramped knee, and several opinions about Mr. Wade Mercer." Rosa appeared at the barn door a minute later, face pale beneath her dark hair apron thrown over her nightdress. "Miss Evelyn," she whispered, "I am sorry. I heard him leave the bunkhouse. I thought he was coming here." "You thought right." Rosa looked at Nathan, then at Atlas, then at the oilskin packet. Fear moved across her face like a cloud over moonlight. "You need to hide that somewhere better than here." Evelyn studied her. "You know what it is." Rosa's eyes filled, though she blinked the tears back. "Not all of it." "Enough." Behind Evelyn, Nathan's gaze sharpened. "Tell me." Rosa shook her head quickly. "Not now. If Wade sees me gone too long, he will know. But trucks come through the North Road after midnight. Not ranch trucks." Clifford writes them as feed deliveries. They are not feed. Evelyn's anger settled into something colder and steadier. "Why did you not say?" Rosa looked toward the house, where one lit window glowed through snow. "Because my boy needs medicine, and Clifford knows it. Because Wade said accidents happen on winter roads. Because I kept telling myself I did not see enough." Her voice broke on the last word. Evelyn rose with difficulty and touched Rosa's cheek. "Child fear is a room men like Clifford build around other people. You found a door tonight." Rosa swallowed and nodded. "I can help you get word to Deputy Clara. My cousin cleans rooms at the hotel in town. She has a telephone in the office if the owner is asleep." Nathan looked from Evelyn to Rosa. "Can you get a message out before dawn?" Rosa nodded, then looked at Atlas. "Will he bite me?" Evelyn answered before Nathan could. "Only if you are rude about biscuits." Rosa managed a frightened little laugh. It warmed the barn by 1/2 degree. Evelyn opened the peppermint tin once more and placed the oilskin packet under Daniel's letters beneath Atlas's tag. The tin was too small, the papers had to be folded carefully, and for one absurd moment she felt like she was packing sandwiches for a church picnic instead of hiding evidence that could bring down a ranch. That was how life worked, she supposed. The holy and the ridiculous shared cupboard space. Nathan leaned back, exhausted by talking and tension. "If I am gone by morning," he said quietly, "take the tin to Deputy Whitcomb." Evelyn looked at him sharply. "Gone where?" "My people may arrive before Clifford wakes. If I can move, I will meet them beyond the South Ridge. It may be safer for you if I am not found here." Men do love deciding what is safer for women without consulting the women. "Evelyn, no. You listen now." She stepped closer, lantern light catching the silver in her hair and the tired lines around her mouth. "I have buried a husband, a son, 2 brothers, and a dream of owning a porch that did not leak. I have been poor so long, poverty greets me by my Christian name. Do not mistake any of that for helplessness. If you leave because it is the mission, say so. If you leave because your pride cannot bear needing an old cook, save your breath." Nathan looked at her for a long time. Atlas looked between them as if judging which human had finally spoken sense. At last, Nathan said, "The mission requires contact. Pride is also present." "Honest answer, we can work with that." Rosa wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "I have to go." Evelyn pressed a honey biscuit into her hand. "For your boy." Rosa took it like it was something sacred, then slipped away into the snow. Nathan watched the door close. "You should rest too." Evelyn sat again on the bucket and tucked the tin back against her heart. "I rested in 1987. I remember it fondly." The faintest warmth came into his eyes. "Daniel must have loved you fiercely." She looked at the dried bean on the stall rail. "He did. And he argued with me fiercely, which is how I knew it was love and not politeness." For a while they listened to the storm. Near the hour when night begins loosening its grip, but morning has not yet dared show itself, Nathan called Atlas with 2 fingers and whispered into the dog's ear. Atlas rose, limped to the barn's side door, and looked back once at Evelyn. "What is he doing?" she asked. "Showing me the way out." Nathan pushed himself up with a control that made Evelyn wince to watch. She moved to help. This time he let her. Together they crossed the barn, slow as old hymns. At the side door, Nathan paused. "If I do not return quickly, do not wait for me. I am too old to wait properly. I meddle." He nodded as if that did not surprise him. Then he looked at the tin in her pocket. "Guard that." With kitchen tools and scripture, Atlas pressed his head briefly against Evelyn's knee. It was not much. It was everything. She touched the air above his ear, not quite petting, respecting his pain. "Bring him back, proud boy." The dog slipped into the snow, then Nathan followed, vanishing into the gray before dawn. Evelyn stood in the doorway until the cold forced tears from her eyes. Or maybe it was not the cold. Behind her in the barn, the dried bean remained on the rail. Ahead of her, the tracks of a wounded man and a limping canine curved toward the South Ridge, where the snow fell harder and the whole valley seemed to be holding a secret in its teeth. Dawn arrived at Cedar Draw Ranch without warmth, a pale stripe behind the mountains, and a hard glitter on every fence rail. Evelyn Parker had always believed morning was honest because morning showed what night had tried to hide. It showed the dirty plates left under the dining table, the boot tracks that led where men claimed they had not gone, the trembling hands of a person who had spent too many hours being brave in the dark. That morning, it showed an empty place in the straw where Nathan Brooks had rested 2 sets of tracks, fading toward the South Ridge, and a dried bean still sitting on the stall rail like a promise too small to defend itself. Evelyn picked up the bean and held it in her palm. She did not put it back in the peppermint tin. Not yet. A prayer was not finished until the person came home, and Nathan and Atlas were still out there, under a sky the color of old pewter. She tucked the bean into her apron pocket and went to the kitchen, because dishes did not care that a person's life had tilted in the night. The stove had gone low. Rosa Martinez stood beside it, stirring oatmeal with one hand and pressing the other to the little silver cross at her throat. Her dark eyes flew to Evelyn the moment she came in. "Did he get away?" Rosa whispered. "He left." "That is not the same." "No," Evelyn said, washing her hands in cold water. "It is not." Rosa looked toward the dining room where Clifford Hayes was already talking loudly to Wade Mercer about missing feed invoices. Wade's voice answered in low bursts. Men like Wade did not waste volume until they had someone cornered. "Miss Evelyn, I can say I asked you to check the barn. I can say I did not know. Child, do not spend your morning building a ladder out of lies. Clifford will kick it away and make you thank him for the fall." Rosa swallowed. "Then what will you do?" Evelyn dried her hands on a towel so worn it was more memory than cloth. "Make coffee." Rosa stared. "Coffee? If I am to be thrown into the snow, I would prefer to be awake for it." The absurdity almost made Rosa laugh, but fear tightened her mouth before the laugh could escape. Evelyn touched her shoulder. "You helped last night. That matters." It was not enough. Enough is a word people use after the danger is over. During danger, we do what our shaking hands can manage. She crossed to the pantry stairs and climbed to her little room. Every step sounded louder than usual. The space above the pantry was narrow and cold, with a cot, a chipped wash basin, 2 hooks for dresses, and a shelf she had lined with newspaper from a July long gone. She owned less than grief and more than some. 2 dresses, a spare cardigan, Daniel's old marine sweatshirt, a pair of socks darned so often they had more darn than sock, a Bible with a cracked cover, and a coffee tin with $32 and some coins wrapped in a handkerchief. Clifford had already said 1 bag. He had not said which memories were allowed to weigh more. Evelyn packed the Bible, the money, Daniel's sweatshirt, and the peppermint tin. She folded the letters carefully, though her fingers wanted to hurry. Hurrying made paper tear. Hurrying made people careless with what could not be replaced. At the bottom of her bag she placed 3 honey biscuits wrapped in cloth because sorrow was easier to carry if one had something to chew. Last, she took the framed photograph of Daniel from the shelf. It was too large for the bag. She removed the picture from the frame, slid the photo into the Bible, and left the empty frame on the cot. "You keep the room company," she told it. "It has never been much for conversation." When she came downstairs, the ranch hands were gathered in the yard as if someone had called a meeting. The snow had thinned to flakes drifting sideways. Clifford stood on the porch in his sheepskin coat, broad and red-faced, with Wade just below him near the steps. Rosa stood near the kitchen door, arms folded tight around herself. Luke Harper was by the farrier shed, hat in hand, eyes lowered. Several hands looked anywhere but at Evelyn. Shame had many postures, and most of them faced the ground. Clifford lifted his chin. "There she is!" Evelyn stepped into the yard, carrying her canvas bag. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes." "Do not good morning me!" Clifford's voice rolled across the yard. He enjoyed an audience. He always had. "You brought a dangerous stranger onto my property, disobeyed a direct order, and interfered with ranch business. You are no longer employed at Cedar Draw." "You told me that last night." "Then you will not be surprised now." He pointed toward the south road. "You leave immediately." Evelyn looked toward the barn. No sign of Nathan, no sign of Atlas. Her chest tightened, but her face stayed still. "You owe me 2 weeks' wages." A murmur moved among the men. Clifford's eyes narrowed.
I owe you nothing. You owe me for work done, Wade smiled. You owe us for supplies wasted, clean cloth, water, lantern oil, maybe food too, unless those biscuits walked out of the pantry by themselves. Evelyn turned to him. Wade, if my biscuits had legs, they would still outrun your conscience. One of the younger hands made a sound like a cough, strangling laughter. Wade's smile vanished. Clifford came down one step. Enough. You are lucky I do not call Deputy Whitcomb and report theft. Call her! The words came before Evelyn could soften them. Clifford stopped. The yard went quiet. Even the horses beyond the fence seemed to listen. Evelyn held his gaze. Call Clara. Tell her an old woman used her own flour sack and carried water to a man you refused to help. Tell her you threw that same woman out before paying wages. Tell her Wade went into the barn after midnight with a pocket torch.
I am sure she will enjoy the conversation. Clifford's face changed, not much, but enough. Fear under anger. Oil under water. You are confused, he said. Age does that. Sometimes it also teaches a body which men bark because they have teeth and which bark because their debts are circling the house. Wade moved fast enough to make Rosa gasp. He stepped into Evelyn's path and grabbed the strap of her bag. Let's see what you are taking. Evelyn held on. My things! That tin in your pocket, one of your things. Wade's eyes flicked to her apron. I saw you hiding something last night. Her hand went instinctively to the peppermint tin beneath her cardigan. Wade saw. His grin returned. There it is. Clifford snapped, Search the bag. Rosa took one step forward. Mr. Hayes, please. He turned on her. Back inside, Rosa. Rosa froze. Evelyn could see her thinking of her boy, of medicine, of rent, of all the ways power made hostages of ordinary needs. Evelyn did not ask her for bravery. Bravery demanded too publicly could become another kind of cruelty. Wade yanked the bag from Evelyn's hand. It fell open in the snow. Daniel's sweatshirt tumbled out, then the Bible, then the cloth-wrapped biscuits. He kicked the sweatshirt aside. Something inside Evelyn went very still. Pick that up, she said. Wade looked pleased. Or what? Or I will remember you exactly as you are, and that is a punishment you may not understand until you are old enough to need mercy. Wade's jaw tightened. He reached toward her cardigan. Before his fingers touched the fabric, a low sound came from behind the water trough. Everyone turned. Atlas stood in the snow, sides heaving, one back leg held carefully, sable coat dusted white, eyes fixed on Wade. The yard seemed to shrink around him. He was not lunging. He was not snarling wildly. He simply stood between Evelyn and the man who meant to frighten her, and somehow that was more powerful than noise. Clifford swore. Where did that animal come from? Evelyn's heart lifted and broke at once. Good morning to you too, proud boy. Atlas took one stiff step forward. Wade backed up despite himself, then remembered the watching men and hardened his face. Call him off. He does not work for me. Then he is dangerous. Evelyn bent slowly and picked up Daniel's sweatshirt from the snow. Her hands were shaking now, but not from cold. Dangerous is a man who needs a rifle to steal from a widow. Wade's face flushed dark. Clifford pointed toward the gate. Enough. Get out. Take the dog if it follows you. If that seal friend of yours comes back, tell him he is trespassing. The word seal landed in the yard like a dropped lantern. Evelyn saw Luke's head lift. Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. Wade's eyes flashed fury at Clifford for saying too much. Clifford realized it a breath too late. Evelyn understood then that Nathan's secret was not as hidden from Clifford as the ranch owner had pretended. He knew enough to fear him. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough. She knelt, repacked her bag, and placed Daniel's Bible carefully on top. She did not look rushed. Let them wait. Let them see what dignity looked like when it had no roof left. Atlas came beside her and lowered his head near the bag, sniffing the biscuits. Not now, Evelyn whispered. We are making an exit. Try to look solemn.
The dog gave a soft huff that might have been pain and might have been opinion. Luke took a step forward, then stopped again. Evelyn saw the battle on his face. She helped him by not asking him to win it in front of everyone. "Miss Evelyn," he said, voice rough. "The road is bad." Clifford cut in. "She should have thought of that." Evelyn lifted the bag strap onto her shoulder. "I have thought of worse roads than yours, Clifford." She turned to the ranch hands. "Rosa,
Keep the stove low after supper, or the beans scorch. Tommy, that gray mare needs her left hoof checked by Friday. Mr. Hayes will forget because she does not owe him money. Luke, the east gate latch sticks because Wade fixed it with pride instead of a bolt." A few eyes softened. Clifford barked, "Go!" Evelyn walked toward the south gate. Atlas followed at her left, close enough that his shoulder brushed her skirt now and then. The gate creaked when she opened it. She had oiled that hinge herself in spring. Funny what a person noticed when leaving. The road beyond Cedar Draw curved between cottonwoods and climbed toward the ridge before dropping into the long way to Livingston. Snow lay thin over ruts of frozen mud. The morning air smelled of pine smoke, horse sweat, and something metallic from the coming cold. Evelyn did not look back until she reached the first bend. When she did, she saw Rosa standing by the porch with both hands clasped at her mouth. Luke near the shed, with his hat crushed in his grip. Clifford glaring from the steps, and Wade already moving toward the saddle horses. Evelyn turned forward. "Well, Atlas," she said, "we have no wagon, no wages, no breakfast, and no permission to be alive in peace. Other than that, the day is young." Atlas limped beside her, head high. "You should not have come," she added more softly. "You are hurt." He looked up at her, then continued walking. "Stubborn. That will serve you well, and annoy everybody else." They went on. The ranch disappeared behind a curtain of snow and trees. The world grew quieter. Evelyn's breath came harder on the incline, and her hip began its familiar complaint. Atlas matched her pace, though she could see each step cost him. Twice she stopped and pretended to adjust her bag so the dog could rest without being insulted. The second time she unwrapped one honey biscuit and broke off a piece. "This is not payment for bodyguard work," she said. "This is because I dislike eating alone." Atlas accepted the piece with grave courtesy. She ate the rest, dry crumbs sticking to her tongue. By late morning the clouds thinned, showing a strip of bright sky over the valley. The beauty of it almost offended her. How could mountains stand so peacefully while people behaved so badly below them? She thought of Daniel's letters in the peppermint tin. She thought of Nathan moving somewhere beyond the ridge, trying to reach people who might come in time or might not. She thought of Clifford saying, "Age does that," as though age were fog rather than a lantern. "He is wrong," she told Atlas. "Age does not make you confused. It makes you crowded. Too many rooms in the mind, too many voices calling from them. A person just learns not to answer every door." Atlas's ears flicked. That was almost wise. Do not repeat it or folks will expect consistency. They reached the ridge road near noon. From there the valley opened wide, the ranch buildings small behind them. Livingston still too far ahead. Evelyn paused to catch her breath. The peppermint tin pressed against her ribs. Inside were Daniel's letters, Atlas's tag, Nathan's evidence packet, and the little bean from the stall rail. A strange collection, she thought. A mother, a dog, a soldier, and a ranch's sins all rattling around together in a candy box. Then Atlas stiffened. His nose lifted. He turned his head toward the road behind them. Evelyn heard it a moment later, the rhythm of horses moving faster than weather required. Two riders appeared around the bend below, climbing hard through the snow. Wade Mercer rode first. Beside him was a younger hand named Briggs, a broad-shouldered man who had always laughed too loudly at Wade's jokes and looked sorry afterward. Wade raised one hand when he saw her. Not greeting, claiming. Evelyn's fingers closed around the strap of her bag.
Atlas moved in front of her tired leg, trembling but body steady. "No,
she whispered. "You do not spend yourself for my pride." The dog did not move back. The riders came on until their horses blocked the narrow road. Wade swung down, boots hitting the snow with a soft crunch. "Long walk to town," he said. "Especially for an old thief." Evelyn looked at Briggs, then at Wade.
"If this is about my biscuit recipe, I would rather take jail."
Wade's expression did not change. "Hand over the tin."
The wind moved through the pines. Atlas's collar looked strangely bare without the tag. Evelyn understood with cold certainty that Wade knew exactly what he wanted, and that Clifford's fear had given him permission to take it. She set her bag down slowly, buying a few seconds from a world that charged interest. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "there are letters in that tin from my dead son." Wade stepped closer.
"Then he will not mind sharing."
Briggs looked away. Atlas lowered his head. Somewhere far down the ridge beyond the trees, an engine sounded,
faint but growing. Wade heard it too. His eyes narrowed. He reached for Evelyn's arm just as Atlas gave one sharp bark, not an attack, not a spectacle, but a warning that split the cold air clean in two. Around the bend ahead, black vehicles appeared against the white road, and at their center, walking, because Pride still had not learned to ride when injured, came Nathan Brooks with his arm in a fresh sling, his face pale, and his eyes fixed on the man reaching for Evelyn's tin. The engine sound grew through the pines like thunder that had learned restraint. Wade Mercer turned toward it with one hand still half lifted toward Evelyn Parker, and for the first time since she had known him, his face showed the plain arithmetic of fear. He had expected an old woman, a tired dog, and a young ranch hand too weak-willed to object. He had not expected 3 black vehicles climbing the ridge road in a neat line, tires grinding through snow, headlights pale in the noon glare. He had not expected Nathan Brooks to appear at the head of them on foot, wrapped in a dark field coat over bandages and a sling, moving slowly but with a steadiness that made every other man on that road seem badly assembled. Nathan did not look like the half-conscious stranger Evelyn had found by the barn wall. He still looked hurt. That mattered. His face was drawn, his steps measured, his left arm held close, and pain had written its small print around his mouth. But authority did not always need volume or perfect posture. Sometimes it came from a man who had survived the night, returned anyway, and brought witnesses. Atlas gave a low sound and started forward, then stopped when Nathan lifted 2 fingers. The dog obeyed, though his whole body leaned toward him. Evelyn felt a sudden ache at the sight. Loyalty was beautiful, but it could also look like hunger. Wade dropped his hand. "You should be long gone," he said, trying to sneer and not quite managing it. Nathan stopped 10 feet away. "I was." His voice was rough, but it carried. "Then I came back for what you tried to steal." "I do not know what you are talking about." Evelyn almost admired how quickly wickedness could put on clean gloves. Nathan's gaze moved to the bag at Evelyn's feet, then to the peppermint tin shape beneath her cardigan, then to Wade. "You know enough." The lead vehicle stopped behind Nathan. A tall man in a charcoal overcoat stepped out, city polish, fighting a losing battle with Montana mud. He had silver at his temples, a leather folder under one arm, and the expression of someone who had spent years reading contracts written by people who hoped no one would read them closely. Behind him came Deputy Clara Whitcomb, hat brim dusted with snow, Park County badge dull against her coat, one hand resting near her belt in the calm manner of a woman who did not need to prove she had authority because she already planned to use it. 2 other men remained near the vehicles, alert but not theatrical. Mason Reed, Evelyn guessed. Nathan's lawyer. He looked exactly like a man whose boots had never forgiven him for leaving pavement. "Mr. Mercer," Deputy Clara said, "step away from Mrs. Parker." "She is not a Mrs." Wade muttered before he could stop himself. Clara's eyes cooled. "Then step away from Ms. Parker." Evelyn decided then and there that if she lived through the day, she would take Clara an apple pie, or at least half of one, depending on how hungry Atlas remained. Wade lifted both hands slightly. "Deputy Clifford Hayes sent us to retrieve stolen ranch property." Clara looked at Evelyn. "Did you steal ranch property?" "No, ma'am. I took my Bible, my son's letters, 3 biscuits of questionable quality, and my last clean socks." Mason Reed's mouth twitched. Clara kept her gaze on Wade. "That settles the socks." Briggs, the younger hand on horseback, shifted in his saddle. His face had lost color. He looked at Wade, then at Clara, then at Atlas, who stared back with the grave disappointment of a church elder. "I did not know he was going to grab her," Briggs said. Wade shot him a look. "Shut up." Nathan took one step closer. "That advice has served this ranch poorly." Wade's jaw tightened. "You think you can ride in here and scare people because you have money?" Evelyn glanced at Nathan. Money. So Wade knew, or guessed. Nathan did not rise to it. "No. I think evidence, debt instruments, witness statements, and county law can do what fear has been pretending to do." Mason opened his folder. "Mr. Mercer, my name is Mason Reed. I represent Brooks Sentinel Holdings and the Brooks Canine Recovery Foundation. As of 8:43 this morning, my client controls the senior secured debt on Cedar Draw Ranch, including emergency enforcement rights triggered by fraud, concealment of assets, and evidence of criminal activity." Wade blinked. Legal language had struck him like weather from another planet. "That does not mean anything." "It means," Clara said, "you should listen carefully before you make your day worse." Nathan's eyes moved to Evelyn. "Are you hurt?" "Only my patience, and it was elderly already." Relief flickered across his face. Atlas could not bear the distance any longer. He limped forward, slow but determined, and pressed his shoulder against Nathan's thigh. Nathan's good hand lowered to the dog's head. The gesture was small, almost hidden, but Evelyn saw his fingers tremble once in Atlas's fur. "You made it," he whispered. Atlas huffed. Evelyn folded her arms. "He ate most of my emergency biscuit. That may have been strategic." Nathan looked at her then, and the seriousness in him softened into gratitude so quiet it did not embarrass her. "Thank you for keeping him alive." "He kept me walking. We are even until supper." Wade made a sharp motion, irritated by their calm. Clara turned toward him. "Do not—" He stopped. Briggs lifted both hands higher from the saddle horn. "Deputy, I really did not know." Clara nodded toward one of her men. "Dismount slowly." Briggs obeyed. Wade stared at the road, perhaps measuring a foolish escape, but the snow, the vehicles, Clara's deputies, and Atlas's unblinking attention all argued against him. Nathan spoke again, low enough that everyone leaned slightly without meaning to. "You were in the barn last night." Wade said nothing. "You saw Atlas's collar. You came back for the tag because you knew it would identify me, and because the tag would connect Atlas to the unit code and emergency contact line. You wanted to know how much I had told Evelyn. I wanted a stray dog off ranch land. Atlas is not stray." Nathan's voice remained controlled, but something ancient and loyal moved under it. "And neither was I." Evelyn held that sentence. Neither was I. She wondered how many veterans had walked through towns and airports and grocery aisles, feeling like strays in the country they had served. She had seen it in Daniel's friends after the funeral. Young men standing near the potato salad with eyes too old for their smooth faces. Nathan shifted his attention to Clara. "Miss Parker has a tin containing Atlas's collar tag and the oilskin packet from the foaling stall. With your permission, Deputy, I would like her to hand it directly to you." Clara nodded. "Miss Parker." Evelyn reached into her cardigan and drew out the peppermint tin. Wade's gaze latched onto it with such hunger that Briggs saw it and flinched. Evelyn held the tin for a moment before giving it up. It felt strange to pass Daniel's letters into another person's hands, even for justice. She looked at Clara. "There are private things in there." Clara's expression gentled. "I will treat them that way." Evelyn handed it over. Clara opened it just enough to see the folded oilskin packet and the metal tag beneath the photograph. Mason stepped beside her, careful not to touch evidence without permission. Nathan looked away while Daniel's photo lay exposed, and Evelyn respected him for that, too. Some men believed rank or wealth allowed them to stare into any wound. Nathan knew better. Clara closed the tin. "Mr. Mercer, you are going to ride back to Cedar Draw with us." "On what charge?" Wade demanded. At the moment, questioning related to assault, intimidation, evidence tampering, and suspected livestock theft. "If you keep talking, I suspect you will contribute additional options." Evelyn really would make the pie. Wade's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Briggs looked close to sick. "Deputy, can I tell you something now?" Clara studied him. "You can?" "The North Road. Trucks come midnight Tuesdays and Fridays. Clifford says they are feed, but feed does not bawl." He swallowed hard. "I helped move gates. I never changed brands. I swear I did not. But I knew it was wrong." Wade lunged one step toward him, and Atlas moved so fast for a hurt dog that Wade stopped as if a wall had risen. Nathan's command was barely a breath. Atlas froze, then sat still between Wade and Briggs. Clara looked impressed despite herself. "Good dog." Atlas did not acknowledge praise from law enforcement. He had standards. Evelyn whispered, "Do not let it go to your head." Mason Reed approached Evelyn while Clara's deputies secured the situation. "Miss Parker, I owe you an apology. That is a popular currency today. Nathan told me you saved his life and protected Atlas. I opened a barn door and shared poor baking. Men keep making it sound grand." Mason's gaze fell to her bag in the snow, Daniel's sweatshirt visible at the top. "He also told me Clifford dismissed you. Clifford likes dismissing things. Women wages, weather reports, commandments." Mason nodded gravely, though his eyes warmed. "You are owed back pay. More than 2 weeks if my review of Cedar Draw's payroll records is accurate. There appear to be deductions that would interest the state labor department." Evelyn blinked. "The state has a department for that?" "It does." "Well, I hope it owns warm boots." Nathan stepped closer, leaning slightly on Atlas now that the immediate danger had eased. "Evelyn, I should have stayed." The apology came plainly, no varnish. "I left you exposed." She looked at him, at the fatigue he was trying to hide, at the guilt that had arrived even faster than help. "You left to bring back law witnesses and a man with a folder. I have seen worse plans." "Wade reached you before I did." "Yes, and Atlas reached him before worse became worst." Nathan's jaw worked. "I am sorry." "Accept it. Do not make a hobby of it." Mason cleared his throat. "Nathan, we need to return to the ranch before Clifford destroys records." Clara agreed. "I have deputies coming from town, but if Hayes gets spooked, he may burn papers, move cattle, or run." Evelyn looked towards Cedar Draw. The ranch sat beyond the ridge out of sight, but she knew every roofline, every drafty corner, every loose floorboard that complained in winter. "He will not burn papers first," she said. Nathan turned to her. "What do you mean? Clifford does not trust paper. He trusts cash, whiskey, and threats, in that order. If he thinks he is losing, he will go to the office safe." "Then the old smokehouse where Wade keeps things Clifford pretends not to know about. Papers he burns only after counting money." Clara's eyes sharpened. "Where is the smokehouse?" "Behind the east windbreak, half buried in weeds. There is a false shelf above the hooks. I found it once looking for canning jars. Wade told me old women should stay out of rooms where meat used to hang. I told him dead pigs had better manners." Mason was already writing. Nathan stared at her with an expression that almost made her laugh. "You knew about the false shelf?" I knew there was a shelf. I did not know it was false until Wade got angry. Why did you not mention it before? You were unconscious, leaving, returning, apologizing, or bleeding through your manners. The conversation had not found room. Clara looked at Nathan. She is coming with us. Nathan shook his head immediately. No. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Clara ignored him. She knows the property. She is a civilian. So is Mason. And he looks like his biggest combat experience was a hotel pillow. Mason said, accurate, but unhelpful. Evelyn adjusted her bag. I am going back. Nathan's face hardened with protective refusal. Clifford threw you out. Wade just tried to take the tin. This is not safe. No, it is not. But Cedar Draw is full of people who are not safe because I left them behind. Rosa, Luke, the young hands who know more than they have courage for. The gray mare with the bad hoof, though she may be the most sensible of the lot. Atlas stood and moved to Evelyn's side. Nathan looked down at him. You too? Atlas leaned his shoulder against Evelyn's skirt. It was a vote. Traitor, Nathan murmured, but the word held tenderness. Evelyn looked toward the vehicles. I will ride if someone helps this dog in first. He has been pretending not to hurt, and I am the only one allowed to do that today. Nathan did not like it. His face said so. But he had the discipline to know when the mission had changed because Truth had arrived wearing an apron. They helped Atlas into the rear of the lead vehicle, where he settled with a dignified groan and immediately placed his head on Evelyn's bag. She climbed in beside him. Nathan sat opposite, and Mason folded himself into the corner with his leather folder like a man entering a chapel built for mud. Clara rode in front, radioing ahead in clipped phrases. As the vehicles turned back toward Cedar Draw, the ridge road unwound below them, white and quiet. Evelyn looked out at the pines sliding past. She had walked away from the ranch with one bag and a dog. Now she was returning with the law, a lawyer, a wounded seal, and a German shepherd using her biscuits as medical motivation. Life did not lack imagination. Nathan watched her from across the vehicle. When we get there, you stay behind Clara. I have spent half my life behind men who thought they knew where danger was. It did not improve my view. Evelyn, I will be sensible. Do not confuse that with obedient. Mason whispered. Nathan, I like her. Everyone does eventually, Evelyn said. Except men with secrets in smokehouses. The vehicles rolled through the south gate of Cedar Draw just after noon. The ranch yard looked almost peaceful under snow. Smoke rose from the kitchen chimney. Horses nosed hay along the fence. For a moment, Evelyn could pretend they had returned for Sunday dinner. Then the office door opened and Clifford Hayes stepped onto the porch with a ledger under one arm and a revolver holstered at his side, his face paling as he saw the vehicle stop. Wade, seated under guard in the second vehicle, looked away. Rosa appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth. Luke Harper stepped from the farrier shed, eyes wide. Nathan opened the vehicle door and stepped out slowly. Atlas followed, limping but proud. Evelyn climbed down last, bag in hand, cardigan dusted with melted snow, Daniel's peppermint tin, now in Deputy Clara's custody. Clifford stared at her as though she were a ghost who had learned paperwork. Nathan looked up at the porch and spoke before Clifford could find his bluster. Mr. Hayes, we need to talk about your debt, your cattle records, and the things hidden in your smokehouse. Clifford's grip tightened on the ledger. For one breath, no one moved. Then, from inside the office behind him, a thin ribbon of smoke curled through the open door. The ribbon of smoke in Clifford Hayes's office doorway was thin enough that a careless man might have called it harmless. Evelyn Parker was not careless. Kitchens had taught her that smoke was a language, and the first sentence was always, hurry. Paper, she said. Deputy Clara Whitcomb was already moving one hand, signaling her deputies toward the porch, her boots sure on the slick yard. Nathan Brooks started forward too, but his body reminded him that courage and ribs were not governed by the same authority.
He stopped for half a breath, face tightening, and Atlas pressed against his leg as if anchoring him to the earth. Evelyn saw the frustration flash through him. She had seen that look on Daniel once, when a fever kept him home from a charity run, and he acted as if the blankets had betrayed the nation. "Let the deputy go first," she told Nathan. "She has 2 good arms and the face of a woman who enjoys arresting nonsense." Nathan's mouth curved despite the strain. "That she does." Clifford backed away from the office door as Clara reached the porch. "It is nothing," he snapped. "Stove flue drew wrong." Evelyn looked at the main house chimney, then at the office stovepipe, which was cold as a miser's handshake. "That stove has not been lit since Tuesday because you said coal costs more than handwriting." Clifford glared at her. "You do not work here. And yet the building still remembers me." Clara pushed past him into the office. A deputy followed with a wool blanket from the vehicle, smothering the small wastebasket fire before it could become more than a desperate gesture. There was no spectacle to it, no roaring blaze, just a sour smell of scorched paper and fear. Evelyn stayed in the yard with Nathan and Atlas, watching Clifford try to rearrange his face into innocence. It did not fit. Mason Reed came around the vehicle carrying his leather folder and an expression so mild it was nearly dangerous. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "destroying records after receiving notice of debt enforcement can complicate your afternoon." "I received no lawful notice." Clifford pointed toward Nathan. "This man trespassed on my land under a false name." Nathan's eyes remained on the office. "Your men found me near the north fence after Atlas located a holding pen used for stolen cattle. They prevented me from contacting law enforcement. You refused aid when I reached your barn." Clifford scoffed, though the sound lacked power. "You expect people to believe a millionaire crawled into my barn dressed like a vagrant?" The yard heard the word millionaire and changed temperature. A few ranch hands stepped closer. Rosa Martinez appeared fully in the kitchen doorway, now flower on her sleeve, fear and hope fighting across her face. Luke Harper stood near the farrier shed, very still. Evelyn looked at Nathan. Millionaire was too shiny a word for him in that moment. He looked tired, hurt, and cold. His boots were muddy, his sling plain, and one side of his jaw had a bruise hidden badly by stubble. Wealth could buy many things apparently, but not immunity from needing an old woman to tell you when to sit. Mason answered Clifford. "Nathan Brooks is the founder of Brooks Sentinel Holdings and the Brooks Canine Recovery Foundation. He also controls, through a duly executed purchase this morning, the senior debt attached to Cedar Draw Ranch and its related operating accounts." Clifford's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Wade, seated beside a deputy near the second vehicle, stared at the ground. The younger hand Briggs looked as if someone had pulled a curtain away from a window he had been afraid to approach. Evelyn felt Atlas lean lightly against her skirt. "Well," she whispered to him, "your friend has a longer title than most hymns." Atlas's tail moved once, barely. Nathan heard and gave her a sideways look that held both amusement and warning. She widened her eyes innocently. Clara emerged from the office holding a scorched ledger by its clean edges. "Mr. Hayes, this appears to contain shipment dates matching what Mr. Brooks provided. Ranch records," Clifford said. "Private. Not when they connect to stolen livestock reports." Clara handed the ledger to a deputy, then looked toward Evelyn. "Smokehouse?" Evelyn pointed. "Behind the east windbreak. False shelf above the old hooks. The door sticks if you pull straight. Lift, then tug, unless Wade fixed that too." Clara nodded. "Deputy Lane, Deputy Orr with me. Mr. Reed, stay where I can see you. Mr. Brooks, sit down before you fall down." Nathan blinked. "Deputy? That was not a suggestion." Evelyn liked Clara more by the minute. Nathan did not sit, but he did lean against the vehicle, which Evelyn chose to count as partial obedience. Clifford looked from Clara to Nathan to the hands gathering near the bunkhouse. His control was thinning.
You people have no idea what it takes to keep a ranch alive in this valley, he said. Banks want blood from stone. Feed prices climb, cattle get sick, men demand wages before the market pays. I did what I had to do. Evelyn felt a tired sadness under her anger. There it was, the sermon of every man who hurt others and called it necessity. No, she said. Clifford turned on her. No! You did what you wanted to do, then dressed it in hardship so it looked less naked. The yard went quiet again. Snow fell from a porch rail with a soft thump. Clifford's face reddened. You are an old cook who thinks prayer pays bills. Prayer does not pay bills. Neither does cruelty, though it may postpone the collector. Nathan watched her, and something in his expression suggested he was listening to more than the argument. Perhaps he heard Daniel in it. Perhaps he heard the many people who had fed him, bandaged him, prayed over him, or told him hard truths he had not ordered but needed. Clara and her deputies reached the smokehouse. Wade's shoulders tightened. Evelyn noticed. So did Atlas. The dog's ears came forward. Clara lifted the door exactly as instructed, tugged, and disappeared inside with her deputies. For several long minutes, no one spoke. Clifford tried to look bored. He failed. Rosa stepped down from the kitchen doorway and moved beside Evelyn. My cousin sent the message, she whispered. Before sunrise. I did not know if it reached anyone. It reached, Evelyn said. You did good. Rosa's eyes shone. I was afraid. Of course you were. Courage without fear is just poor imagination. Rosa let out a small breath that might have been the beginning of a laugh. Then she looked at Nathan. Is he really the man who owns the debt? Seems so. And you fed his dog stale biscuits? Honey biscuits. Stale is a legal conclusion. Nathan, still leaning against the vehicle, said they were excellent. Evelyn turned. You did not eat one. Atlas gave a report. That dog is biased. Atlas looked at Nathan, then at Evelyn, then gently placed his chin against her thigh. Rosa covered her mouth to hide a smile. The moment was small and nearly foolish, but it mattered. Fear had ruled that yard for years. A dog's shameless pursuit of biscuits was not freedom, but it was a crack in the wall. Clara emerged from the smokehouse carrying a metal cash box. Deputy Lane followed with a canvas pouch and several folders sealed in oilskin. Clifford's face emptied. Wade muttered something under his breath. Clara held up the cash box. Mr. Hayes, do you want to explain why records tied to reported missing cattle are hidden in a smokehouse rather than kept with ranch accounts? Clifford said nothing. Mason stepped forward. Deputy for chain of custody, I can identify several of those folders by copies Mr. Brooks's team obtained from the North Pen. Clara nodded. You can do that at the office in town. Clifford snapped. This is my ranch. Nathan straightened slowly. Atlas shifted with him. Not anymore. The sentence was quiet, but it traveled across the yard and settled on every roof. Clifford stared at him. You cannot just take land because you bought paper. Mason opened his folder again. Under the loan agreement you signed and renewed twice, concealment of criminal proceeds and destruction of collateral records constitute default with immediate enforcement rights. The bank could have done this months ago. It chose not to. My client chose differently. Clifford's hands curled. Your client came here pretending to be poor. My client came here to see whether a failing ranch was unlucky or rotten. Mason looked toward Evelyn. He found both rot and mercy. Evelyn wished he had not said it so elegantly in public. Fine phrases made her itchy. Nathan's gaze stayed on Clifford. I did not come here to take a ranch from honest people. I came because Cedar Draw's debt cattle movement and labor records pointed to abuse. I also came because someone told me an old woman named Evelyn Parker worked here. Evelyn turned sharply. Nathan met her eyes. The yard seemed to move farther away. What? She said. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat with his good hand and drew out a folded letter protected in plastic. I did not know you when I arrived. Not personally. But I knew Daniel Parker. Rosa made a small sound. Evelyn did not move. Her fingers went cold inside her gloves. You said that last night like maybe you recognized the name. I did. Nathan's voice softened. I met Daniel during a joint training cycle in California. I was older already in the teams. He was a Marine who believed every room needed more jokes and every new man needed someone to sit with at chow. Evelyn's face tightened, not in pain exactly, but in the effort to remain standing while the past opened a door without knocking. That was him. One night during a water exercise, a young sailor panicked. It happens, more often than people admit. The instructors were moving in, but Daniel reached him first. He kept him calm, talked him through breath by breath. Afterward, he said something I never forgot. Nathan looked down at the letter in his hand. He said, "Do not let a man drown just because he is embarrassed to call for help." Evelyn closed her eyes. The yard blurred. Daniel had written something like that once, not the same words, but the same heart, wearing its work clothes. After he died, Nathan continued, a chaplain sent me a copy of a letter Daniel had written for a support project. It mentioned you, Cedar Draw, and the way you put beans on windowsills when you prayed. Years later, when Cedar Draw appeared in our debt files, I remembered. I asked Mason to find out if you were still here. Evelyn opened her eyes. You came looking for me. Yes. The answer was plain. It held no attempt to make destiny sound tidy. I came to evaluate the ranch expose the theft if it was real, and make sure Daniel Parker's mother was not being buried alive in someone else's cruelty. She looked at him, then at the porch where Clifford stood, then at the kitchen door where she had carried trays, mopped mud, and counted coins for postage. For 11 years she had believed she was useful but unseen, tolerated but not valued, a remnant of someone else's sympathy. Now a man had crossed years' ledgers in snow because her son had once told the truth in his own bright way. The grief that rose in her was not clean. It had gratitude in it, and anger, and the ache of all the years Daniel had not been there to say, "See, Mama, I told you the world was not done with us." She swallowed. You should have said. Nathan looked toward Clifford. I needed to know what I was walking into before I put your name in danger. Then I nearly got killed by my own caution. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Do not say killed. Nearly failed to... He corrected. Better. Clara, who had been giving orders quietly to her deputies, returned to the porch. Clifford Hayes, I am placing you under arrest pending charges related to livestock theft, intimidation, destruction of records, and obstruction. You have the right to remain silent. Clifford stepped back. No! His voice cracked. No, you do not understand. If I go down, everyone here goes down. This ranch feeds them. That old woman cannot run it. These hands cannot survive without me. Luke Harper spoke from near the farrier shed, surprising everyone, maybe himself most of all. We have been surviving around you, not because of you. Clifford stared. Luke's face was pale, but he continued. The east gate was left broken so trucks could pass quiet. Wade told me to fix it wrong. I did. I told myself it was just a gate. He looked at Evelyn. I am sorry. Evelyn nodded once. Then fix it right when this is over. Luke's eyes filled. He nodded back. Clara's deputy stepped toward Clifford. Clifford looked as if he might run, but the yard, the law, and the watching faces gave him nowhere to become powerful again. He allowed the cuffs, though his pride fought every inch of the way. Wade, already guarded, began protesting that he had only followed orders. Clara told him he could explain that in town. The young hands stood stunned. Rosa quietly cried into her apron and then seemed annoyed with herself for doing it. Atlas sneezed, perhaps from snow, perhaps from contempt. Nathan leaned heavier against the vehicle. Evelyn saw his color had gone wrong. She crossed to him.
Sit. I am fine. You are a decorated military man, a businessman, and apparently a collector of ranch debts. None of those are medical qualifications. Evelyn, sit, Nathan. He sat on the vehicle's running board. Atlas immediately placed himself beside him, and Evelyn took the spare blanket from the back seat to drape over the dog and man's knees together.
Mason watched with a faint smile. He listens to you faster than he listens to me. That is because I do not bill by the hour. Nathan looked up at her, the letter from Daniel still in his hand. I have more to explain. Later. It matters. So does not falling over in the yard. He conceded with a small nod. Clara approached with the peppermint tin and handed it back to Evelyn. I photographed the evidence and logged the items. I will need the packet again formally, but I wanted you to hold your son's letters until we reach town. Evelyn took the tin with both hands. Thank you. Clara lowered her voice. The tag stays logged for now, but I noted it belongs to Atlas. Atlas looked up at his name. Clara tipped her hat to him. He yawned. He accepts your respect, Evelyn said. He is simply too senior to show it. Clara's mouth twitched. Mason gathered several documents from his folder and came to stand before Evelyn. Ms. Parker, Mr. Brooks will need medical care and rest. Deputy Whitcomb will need statements. The ranch will need an interim operator today before animals go unfed and accounts freeze. Evelyn felt a warning in the air. Do not look at me like that. Nathan said, No one knows Cedar Draw better. Knowing where Wade hides bad whiskey is not a business plan. Mason held out the papers. It is not ownership. Not yet. Temporary operational authority under emergency management pending final disposition of the debt and assets. Evelyn stared at the pages. English, please? Nathan's eyes warmed. It means you tell people what needs doing so the ranch does not collapse while the law sorts Clifford. She looked around the yard. The ranch hands were watching. Rosa, too. Luke, too. The horses still needed hay. The gray mare still needed that hoof checked. Fear had left the porch, but uncertainty had taken its place, and uncertainty could be just as hungry. Evelyn tucked Daniel's tin into her bag. Temporary. Mason nodded. For now. And wages? Paid. Properly. Rosa's boy needs medicine. Covered. Luke needs help with the east gate, and perhaps his conscience, but I only know how to fix one of those. Luke gave a wet laugh from across the yard. Nathan said, Covered, and we will try. Evelyn looked at Atlas. The dog gazed back with solemn amber eyes, then nudged her bag where the biscuits were wrapped. Fine, she said. I will keep your ranch alive for 1 day. Maybe 2. But if any man here calls me boss lady and that tone men use when they think they are funny, I will assign him laundry until the second coming. A laugh moved through the hands, hesitant but real. It sounded like ice cracking on a creek in spring. Nathan smiled tired and grateful. Clifford, being led toward the deputy vehicle, heard it and looked back with disbelief. The ranch had laughed without his permission. That may have been the moment he truly lost it. Evelyn turned toward the kitchen. Rosa put coffee on. Luke checked the gray mare. Tommy hay the lower paddock. Briggs, if Deputy Clara is done with, you find a shovel and clear the south steps before Mason here sues the weather. Mason looked down at his polished boots. I support this instruction. Atlas rose, intending to follow Evelyn, but Nathan murmured a command, and the dog hesitated, torn between handler and biscuit source. Evelyn pointed at Nathan. Stay with him, Atlas. He is the one who thinks nearly freezing excuses not resting. The dread obeyed reluctantly. Nathan watched Evelyn walk toward the kitchen, Daniel's sweatshirt tucked in her bag, snow clinging to her hem. The whole ranch turning its eyes toward her as if remembering who had kept it breathing all along. Then the old smokehouse door banged in the wind, and from inside, Deputy Clara called for Mason to come see a second hidden box beneath the floorboards, one with names not yet spoken, and a town official's seal on the lid. By mid-afternoon, Cedar Draw Ranch looked less like a place rescued and more like a place suddenly required to tell the truth. Truth Evelyn Parker had learned was not tidy when it first came through the door. It tracked snow across clean floors, opened drawers people had hoped would stay closed, and asked hungry animals to wait while humans sorted out the damage they had done to one another. Deputy Clara Whitcomb had turned Clifford's office into a temporary command post, which amused Evelyn because Clifford had always treated that room like a throne room, and now it smelled of damp wool, extinguished paper smoke, and legal consequences. Mason Reed stood at the desk with his sleeves rolled back, sorting documents into careful stacks while trying not to touch anything sticky. Nathan Brooks sat in a chair near the wall, because Clara and Evelyn had both ordered it, though his posture suggested he considered sitting a tactical defeat. Atlas lay at his feet under an army green blanket, eyes half closed, the tip of his tail moving only when Evelyn passed with coffee. Rosa Martinez worked beside Evelyn in the kitchen, but her hands had become clumsy. She dropped spoons, forgot salt, and nearly poured coffee into the sugar jar. Fear leaving the body could be as disruptive as fear entering it. Evelyn said nothing for a while. She let Rosa chop onions badly and wipe the counter 3 times. There was mercy in allowing a person to be rattled without calling attention to every rattle. Outside, ranch hands moved under new instructions. Tommy and Briggs cleared snow from the south steps. Luke Harper checked the gray mare's hoof with unusual tenderness, as if fixing one small living thing might begin to repair a larger fracture in himself. The younger hands whispered, but not in the old, fearful way. They whispered like people testing whether their own opinions could survive daylight. From the office came Clara's voice, steady and low, asking questions, then Mason's, smoother, but no less firm. The second hidden box from the smokehouse had changed the shape of the case. It contained not just cattle records, but signed receipts, county inspection forms, and a list of payments coded as donations to a civic committee. Mason had gone pale when he saw the town official seal. Clara had gone still. Evelyn trusted stillness more than outrage. Outrage often wanted witnesses. Stillness wanted facts. "Miss Evelyn?" Rosa said suddenly, holding the onion knife in both hands like she had forgotten its purpose. "I knew about some of it." Evelyn stirred a pot of beans. "I suspected." Rosa flinched. "You did, child. You changed the subject every time someone mentioned the North Road. Also, you burn biscuits 3 Fridays in a row, and you do not burn biscuits unless your mind is standing somewhere else." Rosa set down the knife. "Why did you not ask me?" "Because you have a son who wheezes when the air turns cold, and Clifford kept your pay in a drawer he opened only when he wanted gratitude. I figured fear had your tongue." Tears filled Rosa's eyes. "That does not make it right." "No, it makes it human." Rosa wiped her cheeks with the heel of her hand, leaving a trace of onion. "Wade told me if I spoke, my boy's medicine account in town would stop getting paid. He said accidents happen when women make trouble. He never said how. He did not need to. I kept thinking I would wait until I had enough saved. Then the month ended and there was always another bill." Evelyn turned the stove lower. "Men like Wade do not only steal cattle, they steal tomorrow. Keep a person scared of what might happen, and soon she hands over what is happening." Rosa nodded, breathing unevenly. "I wrote things down." Evelyn looked at her. "What things? Dates, truck colors, license plates when I could see them?" "Names I heard through the dining room wall. I hid the notebook in the flour bin under the cracked scoop because Wade never touches flour unless it is already bread." Evelyn almost smiled. "That may be the first fair thing Wade's laziness has done for us." Rosa gave a broken little laugh, then covered her mouth. "I should give it to Deputy Clara." "Yes. I am scared." "Also yes." "Will you come with me?" Evelyn wiped her hands and took off her apron. "I was hoping to sit down sometime before Easter, but justice has poor timing. Come on." They crossed the hall to the office. Nathan looked up the moment Evelyn entered, as did Atlas. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. Evelyn pointed at him. "Do not start. You have already had 2 biscuits and a legal compliment." Clara paused her review. "Miss Parker." Evelyn put a hand lightly on Rosa's back. "Rosa has something to say, and she may need everyone to keep their faces kind while she says it." Mason closed his folder gently. Nathan's gaze softened. Clara nodded. "Take your time." Rosa stood in the center of Clifford's office under the mounted elk head he had loved because it made him feel grand, and began to speak. At first her voice was barely there. She explained the midnight trucks, the false feed deliveries, the envelopes left beneath plates after certain dinners, the way Clifford would order extra coffee for men who never signed the guest ledger. She described seeing Wade wash mud from a trailer before sunrise and hearing him threaten Briggs for asking why cattle were moved without tags. She did not embellish. She did not try to make herself innocent by making herself ignorant. When she reached the part about her son's medicine, she stopped and pressed both hands to her mouth. Clara waited. Evelyn waited. Nathan waited. Waiting could be holy when it did not demand performance. Finally, Rosa said, "I was afraid my boy would pay for my honesty." Clara's voice was quiet. "Thank you for telling us. Am I in trouble?" Clara did not answer too quickly. "You may be a witness. We will need to understand what you did and did not do. But coercion matters. Documentation matters. The fact that you came forward matters." Mason added, "And the foundation can ensure your son's medical account is protected while this proceeds." Rosa looked at Nathan as if she had misheard. Nathan nodded. "No child should have medicine used as a leash." Evelyn looked away for a moment because the sentence had found the room in her where Daniel still stood young and bright, saying, "Mama, do not let a man drown because he is embarrassed to call for help." Rosa began crying in earnest then, not loudly, just with the helpless relief of someone setting down a load she had carried so long her hands had forgotten how to open. Evelyn guided her into a chair. Atlas rose, limped over, and placed his chin on Rosa's knee. Rosa froze. "Is he allowed to—" Nathan's face changed, surprised and moved. Apparently he decided. Rosa touched the top of Atlas's head with trembling fingers. "He is warm." "He is also angling for sympathy food," Evelyn said, "so keep your purse closed." Atlas's eyes flicked toward her. Nathan murmured, "She knows you." Mason, who had been reviewing Rosa's notebook after she fetched it from the flour bin, looked up sharply. "Deputy, these plate numbers match 2 vehicles tied to a livestock buyer under investigation in Idaho." Clara came around the desk. "And the town official?" Mason slid 1 page toward her. "County inspection signatures. If these are genuine, someone was clearing transport papers for animals that never should have moved." Clara's jaw tightened. "That means this goes beyond Clifford." Nathan leaned forward and immediately regretted it. Evelyn saw his hand press against his side. "Sit back," she said. "I am sitting. You are plotting in a seated position. Different thing." Clara looked at Nathan. "We need federal agriculture investigators and state police. Mason can call." Mason nodded. "Already drafting." Evelyn looked around the office. The scale of it was growing, and with it the danger. Clifford had been cruel, but cruelty with paperwork often meant allies. Allies meant men who would not appreciate an old cook, a frightened mother, a limping farrier, a wounded seal, and a retired canine turning over stones. Rosa seemed to sense it too. "What if they come tonight?" she asked. No one answered fast enough. The ranch outside was busy, but not secure. The main road was visible. The north road was not. The old bunkhouse had broken locks. The phone line went dead in storms. Evelyn felt the weight of Cedar Draw settle on her shoulders in a new way. Not as employment. Stewardship. A word her pastor liked but rarely had to do with frozen pipes. "Then we feed everyone before dark," she said. Clara blinked. "Feed everyone?" "Hungry people panic faster. We put the hands in the bunkhouse, Rosa and her boy in the pantry room, Nathan in the downstairs guest room, because stairs will make him lie about pain, and Atlas wherever Atlas declares Congress has assigned him. Nathan started. Evelyn, she lifted a finger. You said I had temporary operational authority. Do not hand an old woman authority and then look startled when she operates. Mason's smile hid behind his coffee cup and failed. Clara nodded slowly. She is right. We need a plan for the night. Nathan looked at Evelyn with reluctant admiration. You have done this before. Kept people from falling apart before supper, yes. It is called church committee work. The plan formed around the kitchen table because all real plans eventually did. Clara would move Clifford and Wade to town before dark with 2 deputies. Briggs would give a preliminary statement and remain under supervision. Mason would contact state and federal authorities from the office phone before the weather worsened. Luke would secure the east gate properly and then check the old smokehouse for any missed compartments under Clara's direction. Rosa would call her cousin to bring her boy from Livingston to Cedar Draw, where Clara believed he would be safer among witnesses than alone in town if word traveled fast. Nathan objected to remaining in the guest room until Evelyn told him the alternative was the pantry cot, which had humbled taller men. Atlas chose to stay in the hallway between Nathan's room and the kitchen, a location from which he could supervise both medical rest and biscuit production. By dusk, Cedar Draw looked almost domestic, which made the tension beneath it stranger. Evelyn ladled stew into bowls for men who had not known whether they still had jobs that morning. She watched them eat at the long table without Clifford at the head. At first, no one sat in his chair. Then Luke, after a long silence, took the chair and turned it sideways, so no one occupied the old place of power. It was a small act. Small acts could begin revolutions if repeated with clean hands. Rosa's son Mateo arrived after sunset, wrapped in a red scarf, thin-chested but bright-eyed, carrying a schoolbook and trying hard not to stare at Atlas. Atlas stared back, then sneezed. Mateo whispered, "Is he a police dog?" Evelyn said, "He is a retired gentleman with secrets." Mateo nodded gravely, accepting this. Nathan, from the guest room doorway, where he had no business standing, said, "He was military." Mateo's eyes widened. "Like a hero?" Nathan looked at Atlas. "Like a worker who did his job and deserves peace." Mateo considered that. "My mom works hard. Does she deserve peace?" Rosa turned away quickly, but Evelyn saw her face. Nathan answered, "Yes." The boy seemed satisfied. "Then I hope she gets some." That sentence quieted the room more effectively than Clara's badge. After supper, while dishes soaked and the wind rose again outside, Luke came to Evelyn by the sink. He held his hat in both hands. "I need to tell Clara more." "Then tell her." "I should have told years ago." "Yes." The word was gentle, but not soft. Luke winced. Evelyn dried a plate. "Guilt is useful only if it moves your feet. Otherwise, it is just pride wearing ashes." He looked at her, startled. "Daniel say that?" "No, I did. Do not look so surprised." A faint smile crossed his face, then faded. "I saw the trucks. I heard calves one night. I knew. And now I will say it." Evelyn handed him a towel. "Dry 3 plates first. Courage can wait 90 seconds. Wet dishes cannot." He laughed, then a small, cracked sound, and it did them both good. Nathan watched from the doorway, one hand resting on Atlas's head. Evelyn pretended not to see the emotion in his face. Men like Nathan needed privacy, even in gratitude. Later, when the dishes were done, and Clara had taken Luke's statement, Evelyn carried a tray to the guest room. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, reviewing papers Mason had no doubt forbidden him to review. Atlas lay beside the bed, not sleeping. "You are bad at being injured," Evelyn said. "I have had practice. Practice has not produced excellence." She set down broth, bread, and 2 biscuits wrapped separately. "One for you, one for the senior gentleman." Atlas lifted his head. Nathan looked at the biscuit, then at her. "Thank you. Do not make a speech, eat." He obeyed for 3 spoonfuls. Then he said, "Daniel wrote about you putting beans on windowsills." Evelyn looked toward the dark window. "He made it sound foolish, I bet." He made it sound like Faith with dirt under its fingernails. She stood still. Outside, sleet ticked against the glass. Nathan reached into his coat pocket and removed a small folded copy of Daniel's letter. "May I read you a line?" Evelyn's hands tightened on the tray. "Not tonight." He nodded immediately and put it away. No hurt pride, no pushing, just respect. "Whenever you are ready." She swallowed. "That may be never." "Then never is fine." Atlas thumped his tail once, as if approving the policy. Evelyn breathed easier. "You are a decent man, Nathan Brooks. Irritatingly secretive, but decent." "I am working on one of those. Good, start with resting." She turned to leave, then paused. "You said this ranch appeared in your debt files. If you control it now, what happens to the people here?" His answer came slowly. "That depends on what we uncover and who is willing to rebuild honestly." "And me?" He looked at her. "That depends on what you want." The question unsettled her more than danger had. What did she want? For years, want had been pared down to wages, coffee, postage, and a dry roof. Bigger wants had felt like wasteful heating in a room no one used. She looked down the hall, where Rosa was tucking Mateo into blankets in the pantry room, where Luke was talking quietly with Clara, where Mason was on the phone saying phrases like federal jurisdiction and emergency injunction. Cedar Draw, for the first time in years, sounded afraid and alive. "I want no one thrown out for doing right," she said at last. Nathan's eyes held hers. "Then that is where we start." The words had barely settled when Atlas lifted his head sharply. His ears locked toward the north side of the ranch. Nathan stood too, fast pain crossing his face. In the hall, Clara's radio crackled. A deputy's voice came through, broken by static. "Headlights on North Road, 3 trucks, no plates visible, moving without lights now." Evelyn looked toward the window. The glass reflected her own face back at her, old, tired, and more awake than she had been in years. Somewhere beyond, the dark men who had profited from silence were coming to find out who had broken it. Night settled over Cedar Draw Ranch with a hard, polished cold, the kind of cold that made every sound travel farther than it had any right to travel. The North Road lay beyond the windbreak, and the old calving sheds invisible from the kitchen windows, but the news of headlights moving without plates passed through the house faster than a draft under a bad door. Evelyn Parker stood in the hallway with one hand on the wall and the other wrapped around the strap of her apron, listening as Deputy Clara Whitcomb's radio crackled again. 3 trucks, moving slow, lights off now, holding near the draw. The words were playing, but they put a picture in every mind. Men did not drive dark roads in winter without plates because they had come to return borrowed pie tins. Nathan Brooks was already halfway to the front room before Evelyn caught his sleeve. "No." He looked down at her hand, then at her. "Evelyn, do not use my name like a key. It does not unlock foolishness." "Those trucks may be connected to the operation. And you may be connected to that bed Clara and I assigned you." Atlas stood beside Nathan, fully awake, ears forward, blanket sliding off his back. He looked more like himself in that moment, not healed, but focused, his body arranging pain behind purpose. Evelyn wished she could order the dog, too, but Atlas had the old soldier's gift of obeying only commands that matched the mission. Clara entered from the office, coat already buttoned, hat in hand. "Nathan, you stay inside. My deputies are watching the North Road. State police are 20 minutes out if the highway stays clear." 20 minutes is a long time. "Then spend it not bleeding through Mason's guest towels." Mason Reed, who had appeared behind her carrying a legal pad, said, "For the record, they are Clifford's towels and emotionally unpleasant." Evelyn almost laughed. Tension made humor either impossible or necessary. In her experience, necessary won, if you let it. Rosa Martinez stepped from the pantry room, closing the door softly behind her so Mateo would not wake. Her face was pale. "Are they coming here?" Clara softened her tone. "We do not know. We are taking precautions." Rosa hugged herself. "That means yes in deputy language." "It means I am not guessing out loud." Rosa looked at Evelyn. "What should I do?" The question struck Evelyn differently now. Not because she had never been asked what to do, but because this time the answer carried more than supper. She looked around the hallway. Nathan held together by discipline and pain. Clara steady but stretched thin. Mason clever and unsuited to winter emergencies. Rosa frightened for her child. Luke Harper in the doorway to the mudroom, hat low, waiting to be useful. Atlas watching the dark as if it had insulted him personally. "We light the house," Evelyn said. Nathan frowned. "That makes us visible. We are already visible." Cedar Draw is the only cluster of buildings for miles with a sheriff's vehicle in the yard. Darkness will not hide us. It will only make scared people imagine worse shapes. Light every lamp downstairs, close the curtains, put the children and witnesses away from windows, and keep coffee hot. Clara nodded slowly. "Good. It shows occupancy and reduces panic. It also lets me see if Mason trips over another rug." Mason raised a hand. "A concern with legal merit." Nathan's eyes remained on the north wall. "And if the trucks approach," Clara answered, "we handle it lawfully." He did not like that word, lawfully, because his training had come from places where law arrived late and survival had to make decisions in the dark. Evelyn understood that. She also understood that tonight was not one of Nathan's overseas nights, though his mind might try to drag him there by the collar. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he heard. "Listen to me. Those trucks are here in Montana. This is a ranch house. Clara is deputy. I am Evelyn. Atlas is grumpy because I have hidden the biscuits. You are not back wherever your eyes just went." His face changed. He took one breath, then another. Atlas pressed against his leg. "I know." "No, you remembered. That is better." Nathan nodded once gratitude kept private. The house came alive in careful motion. Rosa lit lamps in the dining room and hallway. Luke checked locks without rattling them. Mason moved ledgers away from windows and stacked them in a crate near Clara's temporary evidence area. Evelyn woke Mateo gently and moved him to the inner pantry with blankets and a cup of warm milk. The boy blinked up at her, sleepy and solemn. "Is Atlas on duty?" "Yes, then we are okay." Children made faith sound so simple that adults often mistook it for ignorance. Evelyn brushed hair from his forehead. "That dog does take his work seriously. He can have my biscuit tomorrow. That is generous. Possibly reckless." Mateo smiled and curled under the blanket. In the kitchen, Rosa stood by the stove, trying not to shake as she filled the kettle. Evelyn joined her. "Your boy is settled. Thank you. He offered Atlas a biscuit tomorrow. He loves heroes." Evelyn took mugs from the shelf. "Then teach him heroes also need naps, apologies, and clean socks. The world has enough statues and not enough laundry." Rosa laughed softly, then began to cry again, angry at herself. "I am sorry. Stop apologizing for having water in your eyes. If God did not approve of tears, he would not have given us so many reasons, and 2 whole cheeks." Rosa wiped her face. "Do you think Clifford's people will hurt us?" Evelyn chose her words with care. The user of fear was not always the act itself, but the story the mind wrote before anything happened. "I think they want us scared enough to make mistakes. So we will be careful instead of scared when we can, and when we are scared, we will keep our hands busy." Rosa nodded. "What should my hands do?" "Cut bread, Thick slices. Men think better with bread in them, though it pains me to admit it. Outside, an engine revved faintly, then stopped. Atlas barked once from the front room, sharp and controlled. Nathan spoke a low command. Clara's radio crackled. They stopped by the old cattle guard. 2 men outside vehicles, holding position. Clara answered, then turned to Nathan. They are testing us. Nathan stood near the window, but not in front of it. They may be waiting for someone from inside to signal. Luke at the mudroom door flinched. Evelyn saw. So did Nathan. Luke looked down. I know the old lantern signal, he said. The room went still. Clara turned toward him. Explain. Luke swallowed. When trucks came before, Wade would hang a blue feed sack over the north corral lamp if the road was clear. If there was trouble, no sack. Sometimes Clifford used the office window shade. Half down meant wait. All down meant come through the draw. Clara wrote it down. Did you ever signal? Luke's hands tightened around his hat. Once, maybe twice. I told myself I was only doing what Wade said. I did not ask what the trucks carried. I knew enough not to ask, which means I knew enough. Rosa looked at him with pain, not accusation. Evelyn crossed to the breadboard and cut another slice. Luke, guilt later, usefulness now. He lifted his head. The north corral lamp is visible from the draw. Nathan said, can we use it? Clara looked wary. Use it how? Nathan's eyes sharpened, but his voice stayed level. Not to lure them into danger, to keep them stationary until state police arrive. If they believe the road is not clear, they may wait rather than approach the house or flee. Clara considered. No false promise, no confrontation, no civilians exposed. Evelyn raised a hand. I dislike when civilians means me. It especially means you, Clara said. Rude, but clear. Luke said, I can set the lamp. I know the angle. You will not go alone, Clara answered. Deputy Orr goes with you. No heroics. Luke gave a bitter little smile. I retired from heroics before I attempted any. Evelyn handed him bread wrapped in a cloth. He looked confused. For courage, she said. For blood sugar. Courage is unreliable on an empty stomach. He took it with a nod that had more feeling than words. Deputy Orr and Luke left through the mudroom, low and careful, using the path behind the woodpile. Evelyn stood at the stove and counted under her breath, not numbers exactly, but the rhythm of a hymn her mother used to hum while mending socks. Nathan heard. What is that? Old hymn, Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. My mother hummed it when she was worried and did not want to give worry the satisfaction of lyrics. Daniel knew it. Daniel sang it badly on purpose. Nathan's face softened. He did many things on purpose badly to make people laugh. Evelyn looked at him. You knew him better than you said. For 3 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks is enough to know the shape of a man. She turned back to the stove because her eyes had warmed again. He write to you? Once. After the training cycle, a short note. Thanked me for helping a younger sailor he had been worried about. Then he made fun of my haircut. That also sounds right. I kept it. Evelyn stilled. All these years, yes. The kettle began to tremble before boiling. Evelyn watched it because looking at Nathan would undo her. Why? He answered after a pause. Because I lost men later. Good men. Some letters become proof that the world contained goodness before you forgot how to see it. That sentence stayed in the room. Even Mason looked up from his notes. Clara pretended to adjust the radio volume. Rosa cut bread more slowly. Atlas came from the front room and stood between Nathan and Evelyn, perhaps because he sensed the change in both of them. Evelyn wiped her hands. When this is over, you may read me one line, Nathan nodded. One line. Do not choose the haircut line. No promises. A radio burst interrupted them. Deputy Orr's voice came through.
Lamp set, blue sack removed. Visual from draw should indicate hold. Another deputy farther north reported, trucks remain stationary, one person using phone, no approach. Clara exhaled. Good. Evelyn had just begun to believe the plan might work when the office phone rang. Everyone turned. The sound was ordinary, almost cheerful, and for that reason deeply unwelcome. Mason looked at Clara. Clara nodded. He answered on the third ring. Cedar Draw Ranch. His face changed as he listened. He held the receiver slightly away so Clara and Nathan could hear the muffled voice. Evelyn could not make out words, only tone. Male. Controlled. Angry in the way of a man who paid others to raise their voices for him. Mason said, "This is Mason Reed. Identify yourself."
The line went silent for 2 seconds. Then the voice spoke loudly enough that Evelyn heard one sentence. "Tell Brooks the old woman does not understand what she is standing in." Nathan's expression went still. Clara moved closer to the phone. Mason replied, "Threats against witnesses are being recorded and reported." A short laugh crackled through the line. Witnesses change their minds. The call ended. Rosa dropped the bread knife onto the board. No one moved for a moment. Then Evelyn picked up the knife, set it safely beside the loaf, and said, "Well, he is wrong about one thing." Nathan looked at her. "Which thing?" "I know exactly what I am standing in. I have mopped enough of it from this ranch's floors." Mason gave a startled laugh, then covered it with a cough. Clara's eyes remained serious. "This confirms outside involvement." Nathan nodded. "And that they know I am here." "They know Evelyn matters," Mason said quietly. Nathan's jaw tightened. Evelyn felt the protective anger in him before it reached his face. She stepped into its path with a look. "Do not start blaming yourself for being seen beside me. I was visible long before you arrived. Clifford made sure of that every time he shouted in front of the hands." Clara's radio sounded again. "State units 5 minutes out. Trucks turning around, heading north slow." Clara answered, "Do not pursue alone. Maintain visual if safe." The room loosened slightly, but not enough to breathe freely. The threat had withdrawn, not ended. Evelyn poured coffee into mugs because that was what could be done. She handed one to Clara, one to Mason, one to Nathan, and one to Rosa. Atlas stared at the tray. "No coffee," Evelyn told him. "You are already judgmental." Nathan accepted his mug. His fingers brushed hers briefly, cold despite the warm cup. "You should leave Cedar Draw until this is resolved." Evelyn sipped her own coffee. It was too strong. Good. "Leave where?" "Livingston." "A hotel. A protected location. And let men who threaten old women decide which houses old women may enter. This is not pride. No. This is roots."
She looked toward the hallway, the pantry room where Mateo slept, again the office full of evidence, the kitchen stove she could operate by sound, the snow outside covering years of boot tracks. "I have been treated like I was part of the furniture here, useful, worn, easy to move. Tonight I learned I may be more like a nail in the wall. Pull me out wrong and things start falling." Nathan considered that. Atlas, having failed to acquire coffee, eased himself down at Evelyn's feet. Clara said, "For tonight, no one leaves alone. Tomorrow when state investigators arrive, we reassess." Rosa nodded. Luke and Deputy Orr returned 15 minutes later, cheeks red from cold. Luke looked both frightened and lighter. "They left," Clara said, "for now." Luke exhaled. "I thought going out there would make me feel brave."
Evelyn handed him coffee. "And it made me cold. Honest work." Later, after the ranch settled into guarded quiet, Evelyn found Nathan standing in the kitchen doorway with Atlas beside him. He should have been sleeping. Of course, he was not. "You are haunting my kitchen," she said. "I wanted to say something before the morning turns everything into procedure." "That sounds ominous. Sit down."
He sat at the table. Atlas lowered himself under it, positioning his body so his head rested on Evelyn's boot. Nathan removed the folded copy of Daniel's letter from his coat and placed it on the table. One line. She nodded, though her heart thudded. Nathan unfolded the paper carefully. His voice changed when he read, becoming younger somehow, as if Daniel's words had lent him a little light. My mama says the Lord does not waste a person just because the world underuses them. Evelyn closed her eyes. The kitchen went quiet. The line was pure Daniel, stealing her own sayings and polishing them into something he could carry away. She pressed one hand over her mouth. Atlas nudged her boot. Nathan folded the letter again. He was right. Evelyn looked at him through tears she no longer bothered hiding. He usually was. It made parenting very inconvenient. Nathan smiled, and for one moment the house held no threats, no trucks, no ledgers, no men waiting in the dark. Only an old kitchen, a tired soldier, a loyal dog, and a dead boy's sentence coming home after years on the road. Then a crash sounded from the direction of the old calving shed, followed by a shout from Deputy Lane outside. Atlas was on his feet before the mug stopped trembling on the table. The crash from the old calving shed tore through the kitchen like a pan dropped in church. Evelyn Parker reached for the table, not because she was frightened, though she was, but because old knees had opinions about sudden movement, and she had no time to negotiate. Atlas was already at the back door, body low, ears sharp, all biscuit diplomacy forgotten. Nathan Brooks rose too quickly from the chair and had to brace one hand against the table. The folded copy of Daniel's letter lay beside his mug, its single red line still warm in Evelyn's heart. My mama says the Lord does not waste a person just because the world underuses them. Then Deputy Lane shouted outside again, the words broken by wind. Smoke by the calving shed! Deputy Clara Whitcomb came running from the office, coat in one hand, radio in the other. Everyone stay inside unless I say otherwise. Evelyn was already pulling on her shawl. Clara, if that shed is involved... You need someone who knows where Clifford stacked the old tack oil and where the door swells shut. Clara stopped long enough to give her a look. Miss Parker, Deputy, I admire your badge, but it does not know the shed. Nathan said she is right. Evelyn turned on him. Do not sound surprised. I am not. I am pained by agreement, Atlas barked once, impatient. Clara made the quick calculation women in authority must make 100 times a day, weighing safety against useful knowledge while everyone judged the speed of her decision. You come as far as the woodpile. No closer unless I ask. Nathan, you stay on the porch. No, Nathan said. Clara and Evelyn answered together, yes. Mason Reed appeared behind them with his legal pad still in hand, hair slightly disordered for the first time all day. Is there a form for this? Evelyn grabbed a wool blanket from the peg and shoved it at him. Yes, carry that and try not to sue the smoke. They moved into the yard. The cold struck hard. Across the ranch near the north end beyond the windbreak, a gray smear rose against the darker sky. Not a roaring blaze. Not yet. A mean, low smoke pushing from the seams of the old calving shed, the one Clifford had refused to repair, because it was cheaper to let buildings die quietly than admit neglect on a ledger. Deputy Lane stood near the corner, waving them back. Deputy Orr circled from the far side. Luke Harper was not in sight. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Where is Luke? She called. Lane shook his head. He went to check the shed after he heard something. Door jammed. I heard him inside, then smoke. The yard turned very still for half a second. Then everyone moved. Clara ordered Lane to get the pry bar from the truck. Mason opened the wool blanket and looked as if he wished it came with instructions. Nathan started down the porch steps, jaw set. Atlas moved with him. Evelyn blocked Nathan's path with a hand against his chest, an absurd gesture considering he could have lifted her with one arm on a better day. You go charging in,
and we will need to rescue 2 stubborn men and a dog who thinks rank excuses foolishness. Luke is inside, and you are barely outside yourself." Nathan's eyes burned with helpless anger, not at her, at the limits of his own body. Evelyn knew that anger. She had felt it the first time she could not carry a full wash tub without resting. She had hated the tub, as if porcelain had insulted her personally. "Use your head," she said more softly. "Tell them where to cut air. Tell Atlas what he can do without spending himself." He swallowed the argument because he was disciplined enough to know truth when it cost him. "Atlas." The dog turned, vibrating with readiness. Nathan gave a sequence of quiet commands. Atlas ran not toward the smoking door, but around the side of the shed, nose low, limping, yet precise. Evelyn watched him work the air. He stopped near the south wall, scratched once at a loose board, then barked. Clara saw. "There, Lane with me," Evelyn called. "That wall backs the feed alcove. There is a half door behind the stacked pallets if Clifford never sealed it." "Is it locked?" Clara asked. "Everything Clifford forgot is unlocked. Everything Wade touched is stuck." Lane brought the pry bar. Deputy Orr and Mason moved the old pallets under Clara's direction. Smoke thickened, bitter, but still low enough to work around if they stayed careful. Evelyn remained by the woodpile as ordered, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. Nathan stood beside her, every muscle in him leaning toward the shed while his boots stayed planted. Rosa came to the kitchen doorway with Mateo behind her, both wrapped in blankets. Evelyn lifted one hand sharply, telling them to stay. Rosa nodded, tears bright in the lamplight. From inside the shed came a muffled thud. Luke. Alive. Evelyn began humming without choosing, to the old hymn again, no lyrics, only the tune her mother had used to sew courage into cloth. Nathan glanced down. "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah," he said. Daniel sang it. Badly. Then keep humming. So she did. Clara and Lane pried the half door open with a long, complaining crack. Smoke rolled out, and everyone stepped back to let it clear. Atlas tried to push forward. Nathan gave another command, firm but gentle. The dog stopped trembling with the offense of being useful from a distance. "Good boy," Evelyn whispered. "Sometimes staying is harder." Nathan's eyes flicked to her. He knew she was speaking to both of them. Clara disappeared into the low opening, with Lane staying close to the floor, calling Luke's name. Mason stood with the blanket, ready, his city hand suddenly very willing to be practical. Seconds stretched. Evelyn's humming shook once, then steadied. Deputy Orr shouted from the main door that the latch had been wedged from outside. That detail moved through the yard like a cold hand. This had not been an accident of old wiring or careless oil. Someone had meant to trap Luke, or scare him into silence, or both. Evelyn did not let the thought become a picture. She held to the facts. Smoke, door, men helping, Luke alive until proven otherwise. Clara's voice came from the half door. "We have him." Mason stepped forward with the blanket. Lane emerged first, coughing but upright. Then Clara backed out, helping Luke Harper, who was conscious, shaken, and covered in soot but moving. Evelyn's knees nearly gave way from relief. She covered it by snapping, "Luke Harper, if you wanted attention, you could have worn a nicer hat." Luke looked at her, eyes red from smoke, face stunned by survival. Then he laughed, coughed, and cried all at once. Mason wrapped the blanket around his shoulders. Clara guided him to a crate away from the shed. "Breathe slow. Medical is on the way." Nathan crouched in front of Luke, despite Evelyn's disapproving sound. "Who locked the door?" Luke shook his head, trying to gather words. "Did not see. Heard movement. Thought it was one of the hands. Went in, door slammed, smoke started from the rag barrel." Clara's face hardened. "A distraction or retaliation?" Luke grabbed Nathan's sleeve with surprising strength.
There is a book. Under the loose stone by the east wall. I found it before the smoke. I kicked it under the trough. Nathan looked toward the shed. Clara said, "No one goes back in until fire crew clears it." Evelyn stepped forward. "The water trough in that shed has a drain hole to the outside. If he kicked it far enough, it may be reachable from the wall gap." Everyone turned to her. "What?" she said. "I cleaned that shed for years while men discussed ranch business loudly and pretended mops were invisible." Clara sent Lane around the outside with a flashlight and the pry bar. Atlas, released by Nathan's nod, went with him, nose low, careful. A minute later, Lane called out, "Found something wrapped in canvas." He returned, carrying a small ledger, darkened by damp, but intact. Clara took it with gloved hands. Luke slumped, eyes closing briefly. "Names," he whispered. "Real names." Rosa had come closer, despite Evelyn's earlier order, Mateo clutching her hand. She stopped when she saw Luke alive. "Mr. Luke," the boy said softly, "you look like a chimney." Luke opened one eye. "Feels like one." Evelyn said, "That is the first medical assessment I trust." The fire crew from a neighboring volunteer station arrived soon after, along with state police vehicles whose lights painted the snow red and blue without fanfare. The small fire was contained quickly. No one praised danger. No one made a legend of smoke. They spoke of luck, quick work, and the need to check lungs. Luke allowed a medic to look him over after Evelyn threatened to assign him cabbage duty for a month. Nathan submitted to a check too because Clara folded her arms and Atlas sat on his boot.
It was a coordinated ambush of care, and he surrendered with moderate dignity. The newly recovered ledger changed the investigation again. It listed initials first, then full names in a code Mason broke with Rosa's notebook and the smokehouse receipts. A county livestock inspector, a buyer in Idaho, a transport company owner. Clifford Hayes and Wade Mercer were not masterminds. They were a gate and a dirty key. The larger machinery reached beyond Cedar Draw, and the call to the office had come from someone who now knew the machinery was exposed. Evelyn listened from the kitchen while refilling mugs. She did not understand every legal phrase, but she understood enough. Sometimes evil was not a monster in the yard. Sometimes it was a neat column of numbers that made suffering look efficient. Around 9 o'clock, after statements were taken and the calving shed cooled into a blackened, sorry shape against the snow, the household gathered again in the kitchen, because kitchens drew people after trouble the way barns drew animals before storms. Luke sat wrapped in a blanket at the end of the table, hair damp from melted snow, pride badly dented. Rosa placed stew in front of him without asking whether he was hungry. Mateo sat beside Atlas on the floor, reading aloud from his school book in a whisper because he believed dogs appreciated literature if given time. Atlas seemed to tolerate the theory. Nathan stood near the stove until Evelyn pointed at a chair. He sat. Mason sorted copies at the sideboard. Clara took a phone call in the hall, her voice low and serious. "You saved me," Luke said suddenly. No one answered because no one knew which person he meant. He looked at Evelyn first. "You remembered the half door." Then Nathan. "You sent the dog." Then Clara and Mason. "You all came." Evelyn set a mug down before him. "People do that when doors are locked from the outside." Luke stared into the coffee. "I locked plenty of doors from the inside over the years. Saw things, heard things. Told myself a man with a bad leg and no savings had no business making enemies." "You were scared?" Rosa said. He looked at her, shame softening into recognition. "So were you." She nodded. "Yes. But you wrote things down. You found the book." They looked at each other across the table, two people who had stood on opposite sides of silence and discovered the same fear had been managing them both. Evelyn watched them with a tenderness she hid by scraping the pot too loudly. Nathan leaned toward her. "You see everything, do you not?" "No. I miss plenty. I once spent 10 minutes looking for spectacles that were on my face, but people. She shrugged. Invisible people notice other invisible people. It is our one advantage. Clara returned from the hall. State police stopped one of the trucks north of here. Empty trailer, no plates, driver refusing to talk. The other two split off. Patrol has descriptions. Federal investigators arrive in the morning. Nathan nodded. And the caller? Phone trace points to an office connected to the livestock buyer Mason identified. We will move carefully. Evelyn heard the warning under the words. Carefully meant this was not over. Carefully meant the people behind the call had money lawyers and perhaps friends who owed favors. The kitchen seemed suddenly smaller. Nathan looked at Evelyn. You and Rosa should sleep in Livingston tonight, under protection. Rosa looked at Mateo. Evelyn looked at the window where their reflections floated over the dark. No, Rosa said before Evelyn could. Her voice shook, but she continued. My boy is sleeping here because Miss Evelyn said fear is a room men build around us. I do not want to teach him that we must run every time they open the door. Mateo looked up from his book, solemn. I can sleep here. Atlas is here. Atlas sneezed again, possibly from ash, possibly from responsibility. Clara said we can secure the house. I will post deputies through the night. No one moves alone. Doors stay locked, curtains closed. Nathan did not like it, but he looked at Rosa and did not argue as hard as Evelyn expected. Maybe he understood that protection could become another cage if offered without listening. Evelyn went to the pantry and brought back the honey biscuits, the last of them. She placed one in front of Luke, one in front of Rosa, one in front of Nathan, one in front of Mateo, and half of one in front of Atlas. Atlas stared at the half. Evelyn stared back. Medical restriction. Nathan broke his biscuit and silently added a piece to Atlas's half. Undermining my authority, Evelyn said. Morale support, Nathan replied. Mateo giggled. It was the first child's laughter Cedar Draw had heard in too long. Afterward, when people drifted towards sleep in shifts, Evelyn remained at the kitchen table with the peppermint tin before her. She opened it and took out Daniel's photograph. The recovered copy of his line from Nathan's letter lay beside it now, carefully folded. She placed the dried bean from the stall rail inside the tin at last, though Nathan had not fully come home and the trouble had not ended. Perhaps tonight's prayer had changed. Perhaps home was not a destination but a door people kept opening for each other. Atlas rose from the floor and came to sit beside her. His injured leg was wrapped, his torn ear clean, his eyes heavy. Evelyn held out her hand. This time he placed his head beneath it, granting permission. She stroked the fur between his ears. You did well, Sergeant Biscuit. Nathan's voice came from the hallway. He was never a sergeant. He is now. I promoted him in the kitchen. Nathan stepped into the room quieter than before. Clara wants another statement from Luke in the morning. Mason thinks the emergency order will hold. The Foundation's board approved temporary funds for payroll and veterinary care. Good. And for you. She looked up. Do not start. I am not offering charity. Men always say that right before they hand women charity and a hat and call it gratitude. Nathan sat across from her, careful and tired. Then I will wait until I can explain it properly. Wise. For a while they sat without speaking. The house creaked. A deputy crossed the porch outside. Somewhere in the pantry, Mateo murmured in sleep. Evelyn looked at Nathan and saw not the millionaire, not the seal, not the wounded stranger, but a man trying to build a bridge over a place inside himself where too many people had fallen. You came for Daniel's mother, she said. Yes. And found Clifford's sins? Yes. And a dog with expensive biscuit habits, unfortunately. She smiled. Then the smile faded as Clara's radio crackled from the hall again, sharper this time. Deputy Whitcomb, be advised. Clifford Hayes is requesting counsel and claims he can trade information for leniency. He says the buyer is not the one in charge. He says the person financing the operation is already on Cedar Draw property. Nathan and Evelyn looked at each other. Atlas stood, all weariness gone. From somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked where no one was supposed to be. The floorboard above the kitchen gave one careful creak, then another, and Cedar Draw Ranch seemed to shrink around the sound. Evelyn Parker did not move at first. Age had taught her that not every noise needed chasing. Houses talked in winter, pipes sighed, rafters shifted, mice held conventions in walls and never once paid rent. But this sound had weight in it, the slight pause of a foot deciding where to land. Atlas stood beside her chair, head angled toward the ceiling, ears locked, body still as carved wood. Nathan Brooks rose from the table with the grim patience of a man already tired of his own limitations. In the hallway, Deputy Clara Whitcomb's radio continued to spit static after the message from town. Clifford Hayes claimed the person financing the operation was already on Cedar Draw property. Already on the property. The sentence moved through Evelyn like a draft finding bone. Rosa and Mateo were in the pantry room. Luke was sleeping in the bunkhouse under deputy watch. Mason had gone to the office to copy documents. Clara was in the hall. 2 deputies outside. Nathan, Atlas, Evelyn in the kitchen. Unless someone had hidden earlier, or unless one of the people they trusted had brought danger in under a friendly coat. Nathan lifted a hand, signaling stillness. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "Do not command me in my own kitchen," she whispered. "I am suggesting quiet." "Then suggest with less finger." Despite everything, his mouth moved almost into a smile. Atlas did not appreciate the delay. He gave a soft whine, not fear, but information. Nathan whispered a command. The dog moved to the base of the stairs, careful on his wrapped legs, sniffing the lower step. Clara appeared at the hallway entrance, pistol not drawn but hand ready, eyes asking a question. Nathan pointed upward. Clara nodded, then murmured into her radio for Deputy Lane to cover the back of the house. Evelyn rose. Nathan leaned close. "Stay here." "No." "Evelyn, there are 3 places upstairs a person could hide without making the floor complain. Whoever is up there picked the wrong board. That means they do not know the house well or they are carrying something heavy. You need me." Clara considered for exactly 1 second. "Behind me. No argument." "I was saving my argument for breakfast." They climbed the stairs slowly, Clara first, Nathan behind with one hand on the rail, Evelyn next, and Atlas slipping between them whenever the staircase allowed. The upper hall smelled of cold linen and old cedar. Clifford's late wife had once kept guest quilts in a cedar chest at the landing. After she died, Clifford had locked most of the rooms and used loneliness as another storage area. The creak came again from the east guest room, a room no one had entered that night because the window latch was broken and the bed frame leaned like a tired mule. Clara held up a hand. "Park County Sheriff's Office," she called. "Come out slowly." Silence. Then a rustle. Atlas's low growl filled the hallway, disciplined and terrible. Clara pushed the door open with her boot. The room beyond was dark except for snowlight through the window. A man stood near the writing desk, both hands raised, dressed in a camel overcoat too fine for Cedar Draw, and boots far too clean for anyone who had crossed the yard honestly. His hair was silver, his face narrow, his expression irritated rather than afraid. Evelyn recognized him after a moment. Malcolm Voss. He was a livestock broker from Bozeman, or that was what Clifford called him. He had eaten at Cedar Draw 3 times in the last year, praising Evelyn's rolls while never once looking at her face. Men like that were easy to remember because they trained themselves to forget. "Deputy," he said smoothly, "this is a misunderstanding." Clara's voice was flat. "Hands where I can see them. Why are you in a locked room?" "Mr. Hayes invited me." "I arrived earlier to discuss legitimate business and waited upstairs when the unpleasantness began." Evelyn looked at the desk. One drawer was open. Papers lay partly inside a leather satchel on the floor. Atlas sniffed the air and moved toward the satchel, stopping when Nathan told him to. Malcolm's gaze flicked to the dog with distaste. "Control that animal," Evelyn said. "He is showing more control than most of the men in this house." Malcolm glanced at her then, and she saw recognition arrive late and unwelcome. "The cook, the temporary operational authority," Evelyn replied. Nathan made a sound that might have been pain or approval. Clara stepped into the room. "Mr. Voss, you are going to move away from the desk slowly." "I have rights." "You do. And I have a warrant in progress, exigent circumstances related to evidence destruction and a witness report that the financier of a criminal operation is on this property. Move." Malcolm's polished face tightened. He moved. Mason arrived at the top of the stairs, breathless, holding a folder. "Deputy, do not let him leave with that satchel." Malcolm's eyes sharpened. "Read." "Mr. Voss?" Mason looked almost pleased, which made him seem more dangerous than when he looked lawyerly. "I wondered when your name would stop hiding behind shell companies." Clara secured the satchel and called for Deputy Lane. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, eyes fixed on Malcolm. "You financed the cattle operation." Malcolm gave a soft laugh. "Mr. Brooks, surely you understand the difference between financing and being misled by rustic men with poor bookkeeping." "I understand men who put distance between themselves and harm so they can call it market exposure." Evelyn felt those words land. Malcolm did not like them. "This is business." "No," Evelyn said. Everyone looked at her. She had not planned to speak, but grief and anger had already stood up inside her and were reaching for their coats. Business is paying Rosa on time. Business is fixing the gray mare's hoof because she earns her keep too. Business is knowing which fence goes down in March Melt and which hand sends money to his sister in Billings. Whatever you do with hidden papers in locked rooms is not business. It is cowardice with better shoes. Malcolm stared at her as if a chair had begun quoting scripture. Mason pressed his lips together. Clara's eyes remained on Malcolm, but warmed at the edges. Nathan looked at Evelyn with open admiration, which she found inconvenient. Deputy Lane came up and took Malcolm's arm. Malcolm did not resist. Men like him preferred rooms where force was abstract. Clara read him his rights while Mason collected the satchel under evidence procedure. Inside it, they found transfer documents, maps of the North Road, bank routing sheets, and a draft sale agreement for a portion of Cedar Draw's eastern ridge. Evelyn did not understand the routing sheets. She understood the map. Her hand went to the doorframe. "That land," she said. Mason looked at the map. "East Ridge parcel. Behind the old pine stand?" "Yes!" Her breath changed. Nathan noticed immediately. "Evelyn." She took the map from Mason before anyone could warn about evidence, then stopped herself and let him hold it where she could see. The marked parcel wrapped around a small rise above the creek, a place with 3 wind-bent pines and a view toward the mountains. Most people saw unused land there, too rocky for grazing and too exposed for a house. Evelyn saw Daniel's cross. Not a grave, not legally. Daniel rested in a veteran's cemetery far away, under a neat stone the government maintained better than any living promise. But when his belongings finally came home, when the house felt too small for grief and the world too large for one mother's voice, Evelyn had carried a small cedar cross to that ridge and set it beneath the middle pine. Clifford had laughed when he saw it, later, saying she had made a shrine to absence. She had not answered. Some places did not require explanation to people who could not kneel. "He was selling Daniel's Ridge," she said. Malcolm looked annoyed. "It is a non-productive parcel." The sentence struck harder than shouting. Non-productive, as if land mattered only when it fattened something for sale. Evelyn felt the years gather behind her, the folded flag, the letters, the beans buried under the cottonwood, the times she had walked to that ridge with coffee because sunrise was easier if she could tell Daniel about it. Nathan stepped forward very slowly. "That sale will not happen." Malcolm smiled thinly. "You control the debt, Mr. Brooks, not every prior contractual negotiation. There are buyers with rights." Mason's voice cut in. "Not if the parcel was pledged as collateral and the sale was structured to conceal assets during default. Also, not if signatures were procured under fraudulent valuation. Also, frankly, not if I remain in a profession I enjoy." Evelyn did not fully follow, but she liked the ending. Clara ordered Malcolm downstairs under guard. As he passed Evelyn, he said quietly, "Old women should be careful where they plant memories. Land changes hands." Atlas moved before Nathan did not, lunging, simply placing himself between Malcolm and Evelyn with the sound so low it seemed to come from the floorboards. Malcolm stepped back into Deputy Lane's grip. Clara said, "Add witness intimidation." Malcolm shut his mouth. They went downstairs. Evelyn remained in the guest room looking at the map in Mason's hands. Nathan stayed beside her. The storm had thinned outside and moonlight made the ridgeline visible through the window. "Daniel's Ridge," Nathan said. She nodded. "I put a cross there because I could not put supper on the table for him anymore. It is foolish. No, it is not a legal grave. That does not make it foolish." She looked at him. "Men have been telling me what counts my whole life. Counted wages, counted cattle, counted debt, counted years until I was too old to be worth keeping. Nobody counted how many times I climbed that hill so I would not scream in the pantry." Nathan's face tightened with feeling he did not try to use. "Then we count it now." The words were quiet, but they steadied something in her. Mason cleared his throat softly. "Miss Parker, we should make a formal note of the memorial site's existence. It may support blocking any sale until the asset review is complete." Evelyn almost laughed through the ache. "My grief is useful paperwork?" Mason smiled gently. "Tonight, yes." Then Daniel would be amused. He loved forms when they bothered the right people. Downstairs, Rosa called Evelyn's name. There was worry in it. Evelyn folded herself back into the present and followed Nathan and Mason down. The kitchen had become crowded again. Malcolm Voss sat under deputy watch in the dining room, stiff with offended importance. Clara stood by the table reviewing the satchel contents. Rosa held Mateo close. Luke had come from the bunkhouse despite medic orders and stood near the door, blanket over his shoulders. "I know him," Luke said, nodding toward Malcolm. "He came on truck nights, not every time, but when he came, Clifford got nervous." Rosa added, "He paid in envelopes. Clifford said he was an investor." Malcolm called from the dining room. "You people are making ignorant assumptions." Evelyn answered, "Sir, I have been ignorant of many things in my life, but I know an envelope passed under a dinner plate when I see one. You once hid one beneath my lemon pie." Clara's head turned. "You saw that? I was carrying coffee. Invisible, remember?" Mason wrote it down. Nathan looked at the table, then at Malcolm. "You were here the night I was caught." Malcolm did not answer. "You called Clifford after Atlas found the North Pen." "You told Wade to make me disappear from the paperwork." Clara's eyes sharpened at Nathan's careful phrasing. He avoided describing harm. He did not need to. The shape was there. Malcolm said, "I did not know who you were." Nathan's voice dropped. "You knew I was a man. You knew Atlas was a service animal. That was enough." The room went still. Evelyn heard Daniel's line again in her mind. "Do not let a man drown because he is embarrassed to call for help." Here was the darker mirror of it. Malcolm had seen someone struggling and asked whether helping would inconvenience his profit. Clara's radio crackled with new updates. State police had secured the stopped truck. Federal investigators confirmed Malcolm Voss had been under review in 2 states. More warrants were coming. The large machinery was beginning to grind in the other direction now, slowly, but with weight. For the first time all night, Evelyn believed it might not crush them. Then Mason found the last paper in the satchel. He unfolded it once, then again, and his expression changed. Nathan. Nathan took the page. Evelyn watched his eyes move across it. "What is it?" she asked. Mason answered carefully. "A contingency instruction. If the Cedar Draw operation was exposed, Voss intended to force a rapid sale of the East Ridge parcel tonight through a remote notarization and file it before the debt enforcement posted publicly." Evelyn stared. "Tonight?" "Yes." Nathan's jaw tightened. "The buyer—" Mason looked at Malcolm. "A development company tied to Voss." Clara stepped toward the dining room. Malcolm sat very still now. Evelyn looked toward the dark window. Daniel's Ridge lay beyond it, quiet, under snow, unaware that men had tried to sell it in the night, while a dog, a deputy, a frightened mother, and an old cook were busy saving a ranch from its own secrets. A strange calm came over her. Not peace. Not yet. Something sturdier. "Then we go there," she said. Nathan frowned. "To the ridge?" "Yes, now. Before any man in polished boots decides my son's cross is easier to erase if no one is standing beside it." Clara shook her head. "It is dark, cold, and we have suspects in custody. You have deputies. You have vehicles. You have a map. You have a temporary old woman with operational authority and a personal interest." Mason murmured, "Operational authority does not usually include midnight memorial inspections." Evelyn looked at him. "Write smaller." Nathan studied her face. He understood before the others did. This was not about legal necessity alone. It was about refusing to let grief be handled in private while greed filed papers in public. It was about standing where Daniel's name had been made small and making the world look at it. "I will go with her," Nathan said. Evelyn said, "You will ride. I will ride." Clara considered the room, the suspects, the deputies, the risks. At last, she said, 10 minutes. 2 vehicles. Nathan stays in the vehicle unless needed. Atlas stays leashed. Atlas looked offended by the word leash. Evelyn patted his head. "Even generals wear ties at funerals." The preparation was quick. Rosa wrapped Evelyn's shoulders in a heavier coat. Mateo, half awake, handed her his red scarf. "For Daniel's place," he said. Evelyn knelt with effort and let him wrap it around her neck. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Will Atlas guard it?" "I suspect Atlas guards anything that stands still long enough." Nathan helped Atlas into the vehicle while pretending the motion did not hurt. Evelyn pretended to believe him. They drove toward the East Ridge under a sky clearing to hard stars. Snow shone in the headlights. The ranch fell behind them, smaller and smaller, until only the kitchen lights remained, glowing like a promise someone had refused to blow out. The road climbed past the windbreak, past the old creek crossing, toward the 3 Pines. Evelyn's hands rested in her lap around the dried bean she had taken from the tin again without remembering when. The vehicle stopped below the ridge because the track narrowed. "Short walk," Clara said. "Slow," Nathan added. Evelyn looked at him. "I invented slow." They stepped out into the cold. Atlas moved beside them, leashed but alert. The 3 Pines stood ahead, black against the stars. Beneath the middle one, the small cedar cross leaned slightly from years of wind. Snow had gathered on its arms. Evelyn walked to it alone for the last few steps. She brushed snow from the wood with her gloved hand. Daniel Parker. Beloved son. The letters were carved unevenly because she had done them herself with a kitchen knife, and more tears than skill. Nathan stopped a respectful distance away. Clara and Mason did too. Atlas sat in the snow, ears forward, quiet.
Evelyn tied Mateo's red scarf gently around the base of the cross. "There," she whispered. "Company."
The wind moved through the pines. For one clear moment, the ridge did not feel like absence. It felt like witness. Then headlights appeared far below on the service road, moving too fast toward the ridge. Clara turned sharply. Nathan reached for Atlas's leash. Mason swore softly, then apologized to the memorial. Evelyn kept one hand on Daniel's cross and looked down at the approaching lights. Whoever had wanted this land erased had not finished trying. The headlights climbed the service road below Daniel's ridge with a reckless brightness that made the snow flash silver between the pines. Evelyn Parker kept one gloved hand on the small cedar cross and felt the wood tremble lightly, not from fear, but from the wind moving through years. Deputy Clara Whitcomb was already speaking into her radio, voice clipped and calm. Mason Reed stepped behind the nearest pine with the instinct of a man who preferred legal cover but would accept botanical cover in an emergency. Nathan Brooks stood beside Atlas, one hand on the leash, his face pale under the starlight and his eyes fixed on the approaching vehicle. Evelyn saw the change in him, the way his body gathered itself toward action, even while injury argued. It was not the posture of a man who wanted violence. It was the posture of a man whose life had taught him that danger rarely waited for paperwork. Atlas felt it too. The German shepherd leaned forward, sable coat rippling in the wind, not pulling exactly, but offering every ounce of himself to the task. "Stay," Nathan murmured. Atlas stayed. Barely. Clara looked toward Evelyn. "Miss Parker behind the vehicle." Evelyn did not move. "This is my son's place, and I intend to keep you alive in it." That was fair. Evelyn released the cross slowly and stepped back, but she did not go as far as Clara wanted. Old women had their own geometry. The vehicle below hit a rut, slowed, then surged again. A second set of lights appeared farther back, moving from the direction of the ranch. Clara's deputies, Evelyn hoped, or state police, or some other mercy with tires. Nathan said quietly, "Only one vehicle coming fast. Could be someone trying to reach Voss's documents, could be a scare move, could be Clifford," Mason asked. "He is in custody," Clara said. Her radio crackled. The deputy at the ranch reported Clifford and Malcolm were secured, but Wade Mercer had complained of chest pain during transport, and the vehicle had pulled over near the lower gate for medical precaution. Then static swallowed the rest. Clara's eyes hardened. Nathan's did too. Evelyn understood without anyone spelling it out. Wade had found a way to move. Perhaps not far, perhaps not free, but enough. "That man has the moral endurance of a cockroach," Mason muttered, then looked at Evelyn. "Sorry. Tonight I will allow it." The climbing headlights veered at the last bend and stopped 50 yards below the pines. The engine remained running. A door opened. Wade Mercer stepped into the beams, one hand raised, the other close to his side. He looked smaller than he had in the ranch yard, coat half buttoned, hat gone, face tight with desperation. Behind him, Briggs sat in the driver's seat, white-knuckled and terrified. Clara called out, "Wade Mercer, stop where you are! Hands visible!" Wade obeyed, for once, though every line of him suggested resentment. "I did not come for trouble." Evelyn nearly laughed. "Then trouble must be devastated by your neglect." Wade's eyes found her in the dark. Even from a distance, she felt the bitterness. "This land is not yours." Nathan stepped half a pace forward. "It is not yours either. You think you can save everybody with money?" Wade shouted. His voice cracked across the snow. "You come in with your lawyer and your dog and your sad old woman story, and suddenly every fool here thinks he is righteous." Atlas growled. Nathan tightened the leash and gave a soft command. The dog settled, though his eyes stayed on Wade. Clara kept her voice steady. "Wade, step away from the vehicle."
Briggs, turn off the engine and put both hands out the window. Briggs complied so quickly Mason whispered, "At least one person values advice." Wade looked toward the cross. "Clifford should have cleared this ridge years ago. Nothing but rocks, dead brush,
And that little stick she planted like the whole valley needed to bow to it." Evelyn felt Nathan shift beside her. She raised a hand, slightly stopping him. Some insults did not deserve a young man's anger. They required an old woman's accounting. She stepped forward until Clara hissed her name. Evelyn stopped just within the wash of headlights. Snow glowed around her boots. Mateo's red scarf fluttered at Daniel's cross behind her.
"Wade!"
She called, and her voice surprised even her by carrying so well.
"Do you know why I put that cross there?"
"Because you cannot let dead things stay dead." The words hit, but they did not knock her down. Perhaps once they would have. Years had made a brace inside her.
"No," she said. "I put it there because grief needs a place to sit down. If it has nowhere to sit, it follows you into every room and eats from every plate."
Wade's face twisted.
"I do not care about your grief. I know."
"That is why you became so useful to men like Clifford and Malcolm. They never needed you to care. They needed you not to." The wind moved through the pines, and for a strange moment, even Wade seemed to listen. Evelyn went on, not loudly, not theatrically, but with the plainness of a woman telling a kitchen where the flour belonged. "You think land is empty if it does not make money. You think old people are empty if they cannot be worked hard. You think a dog is just an animal unless it can scare someone for you. You think a wounded man is nobody until you learn his name can cost you. That is not toughness, Wade. That is poverty of the soul." Mason whispered, "Good heavens." Nathan said softly, "Let her finish." Wade's hand twitched near his coat. Clara's voice sharpened, "Hands up!" Wade froze. He was not holding a weapon in view, and Evelyn did not look for one. She would not let the moment become about the mechanics of harm. It was about the choice before him: continue making fear or stop. Briggs called from the vehicle, voice shaking. "Wade, please, just stop. I cannot do this anymore." Wade rounded on him. "You brought me! You said you just wanted to talk! You idiot!" Clara stepped forward. "Wade, you are surrounded, and state units are on the road below. No one here needs to get hurt tonight. Kneel in the snow and put your hands behind your head." Wade looked at Nathan. "You would like that, wouldn't you, big hero watches me crawl?" Nathan's face was calm, but Evelyn saw what the calm cost. "I would like you to stop frightening people who have had enough." Wade laughed once, ugly and tired. "You do not know what enough is." Nathan answered, "Yes, I do." Those 3 words changed the air. No boast, no explanation, just truth from a man who had looked at enough in many forms and found it still hungry. Atlas leaned against Nathan's leg. Wade stared at them, then at Evelyn, then at the cross with Mateo's red scarf. For one fragile second, Evelyn thought he might yield. Then he turned suddenly toward the vehicle, perhaps to run, perhaps to grab papers, perhaps only because panic had yanked his strings. Atlas surged. Nathan held, Clara moved, Briggs shouted, and the whole ridge seemed to tilt toward disaster. It did not become the kind of scene men told later with relish. Clara and her deputies ended it quickly and lawfully when the second set of lights reached the ridge. Wade was stopped, restrained, and taken away, shouting words the wind scattered before they could settle. Briggs surrendered, shaking so badly Clara wrapped him in a blanket before questioning him. No one cheered. Evelyn was glad of that. Cheering over another person's collapse, even a cruel person's, left a taste she did not trust. Nathan stood very still afterward, one hand on Atlas, breathing through pain. Evelyn touched his sleeve. "You held him back, Atlas. Yourself." Nathan looked down at her. Starlight caught the lines of exhaustion in his face. "I wanted to do more. You did plenty. It did not feel like enough, She looked at Wade being led to a patrol vehicle below. Enough is not always dramatic. Sometimes enough is refusing to become the thing that hurt you. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. Atlas pressed closer. Clara approached, face softened by relief, but still professional. "Everyone okay?" "No," Evelyn said. Clara's eyes sharpened. Evelyn nodded toward Daniel's cross. "But everyone is standing. That will do for tonight." Mason came from behind the pine, brushing snow from his coat with exaggerated dignity. "For the record, trees provide inadequate legal shelter." Clara said, "You were told to stay by the vehicle." "I stayed near a wooden entity of similar origin." Evelyn looked at him. "Mason, if you try that kind of reasoning before God, pack a lunch." Nathan laughed, then a short, careful laugh that did not hurt too badly but surprised him. The sound eased the ridge. Even Clara smiled. They stood for a moment under the hard stars while deputies handled Wade and Briggs below. Evelyn turned back to the cross and adjusted Mateo's red scarf. It had come loose in the wind. Nathan came beside her, moving slowly. "Daniel should not have had to be defended tonight. The dead often rely on the living for housekeeping." That is one way to put it. Most theology is housekeeping if you look close. Put love where people can find it. Sweet bitterness before it draws flies. Open windows when grief makes the room sour. Nathan looked at her with that inconvenient admiration again. "You should write sermons." "I prefer biscuits. Fewer complaints from the Baptist side of town." Atlas sat at the base of the cross. He lowered his head, sniffed the wood, then placed one paw gently in the snow near it. Evelyn did not speak for a while. Neither did Nathan. The dog's gesture was not ceremony, not in any human sense, but it held more reverence than many polished words. Clara finished with the deputies and joined them. "We should return. Federal investigators arrive at first light. Wade's attempt to come here will strengthen the intimidation case. Briggs has agreed to give a full statement." Mason added, "The emergency filing is stopped. The East Ridge parcel cannot be transferred without court review." Evelyn nodded. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt tired, down to the seams. "What happens to the cross?" Mason's voice gentled. "We can formally exclude this section from any sale and establish an easement or memorial designation, depending on the final ownership structure." English. "We can protect it." "Good," Nathan said, "more than protected." Evelyn looked at him. "What does that mean, tomorrow, when I can say it properly? You are getting fond of postponing explanations. You keep ordering me to rest. Do not blame wisdom for your poor timing." They returned to the vehicles. This time, Evelyn rode with Nathan Atlas and Mason, while Clara followed in the deputy vehicle. The road down from the ridge seemed longer in the dark. Evelyn watched the cross disappear behind the pines. For years, that place had been hers alone, a private ache under open sky. Tonight others had stood there, and not turned away. That did not heal grief. Healing was too tidy a word, but it gave grief company, and company changed the weight. Back at the ranch, Rosa met them in the kitchen with a blanket around her shoulders and Mateo asleep against her side. "Are you all right?" she asked. Evelyn removed the red scarf and handed it back. "Your boy guarded Daniel's ridge very well." Rosa's eyes filled. "He will be proud." Mateo stirred. "Atlas okay?" Atlas, entering behind Evelyn, gave one tired wag. "He is insufferably heroic," Evelyn said. "Do not encourage him." Mateo smiled in his sleep. The house settled again, though no one trusted rest completely. Clara posted deputies at both roads. Malcolm Clifford and Wade were separated and secured under transport. Briggs gave his statement through tears and fear, naming the routes, the buyers, and the nights he had wished someone else would stop what he lacked courage to stop. Luke sat with him for part of it, not excusing him, just making sure shame did not push him back into silence.
Rosa brewed coffee until the kitchen smelled like a church basement after a funeral. Mason filed emergency documents by phone and fax, muttering affectionately at outdated machines. Nathan finally allowed Evelyn to guide him back to the guest room. Atlas followed, then stopped in the hallway, torn between Nathan's door and Evelyn's kitchen. "Go with him," Evelyn said. "He needs watching more than I do." Atlas stared. "I have a chair and a rolling pin. He has stubbornness and paperwork. Go!" Atlas went, though slowly, and settled beside Nathan's bed.
Evelyn turned to leave, but Nathan called her name. She paused. "When Daniel wrote about you," he said, "I thought he was exaggerating." He often did. Once he described my meatloaf as edible. He was not exaggerating about this. She looked at him, too tired to dodge the tenderness. "About what?" Nathan's eyes were heavy, but his voice was clear. "He said you made people remember they had better selves." Evelyn stood in the doorway with one hand on the frame. No clever answer came. Maybe there were moments when humor should take off its hat and wait outside. "Sleep, Nathan," she said softly. "Morning will be greedy." She went downstairs and sat alone at the kitchen table. The peppermint tin rested before her. She opened it and placed Mateo's red scarf beside it for safekeeping until morning, then took out one dried bean and set it on the windowsill above the sink. She did not know whom she was praying for this time. Wade, perhaps. Briggs. Nathan. Herself. The ranch. All of them. Prayer did not always arrive with a label. Outside the eastern sky remained dark, but somewhere under that darkness, morning had already started walking toward them. Just before dawn, while Evelyn's eyes finally began to close, the office phone rang again. Mason answered from the hall, voice hoarse. Evelyn heard him say, "Yes, Judge." Then silence. Then, "Understood." He came into the kitchen holding a faxed page like it might bite him. Nathan appeared at the stairs despite every instruction. Clara stepped in from the porch. Mason looked at Evelyn first. "The court granted emergency control to Brooks Sentinel. Cedar Draw is legally out of Clifford's hands." Evelyn let out a breath. Nathan's face did not ease. "There is more," Mason said. "The judge wants an operator named by noon. If we do not name one, the bank can appoint a receiver from outside the valley." Everyone turned very slowly toward Evelyn. Morning did not so much arrive at Cedar Draw Ranch as gather itself from the edges of exhaustion. A gray light spread over the windows, revealing coffee rings on the kitchen table blankets over chair backs, muddy footprints thawing into dark half-moons on the floor, and faces worn thin by a night that had asked too much and was not finished asking. Evelyn Parker stood near the stove, with Mason Reed's faxed page in her hand, and every eye in the room pointed toward her, as if she were the answer to a question she had not agreed to hear. The judge had granted emergency control to Brooks Sentinel. Clifford Hayes no longer held the ranch. Malcolm Voss's attempted sale of Daniels Ridge had been stopped. State and federal investigators were on their way. Wade Mercer was in custody. Briggs was talking. Rosa's notebook had become evidence. Luke's recovered ledger had names enough to keep several agencies busy, and Atlas was asleep under the table, with his muzzle resting on Evelyn's boot because, apparently, command decisions required contact with biscuit sources. By noon, Mason said an operator had to be named. If not, an outside receiver would come from the bank, a stranger with clean gloves, a clipboard, and no memory of which pipe froze first or which horse mourned when her pasture mate was sold. Everyone looked at Evelyn. She looked at the facts. The words were English arranged by lawyers, which meant they managed to feel foreign. "No," she said. Nathan Brooks, leaning in the doorway because sitting had failed again, blinked. "No. No." Mason adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Parker, perhaps we should discuss what the role entails before you decline." "I know what it entails. Work,"
Blame forms, men pretending they cannot hear women weather debt, sick animals, and someone saying, just one more signature until the Lord himself loses patience. No. Rosa's face fell. Luke looked down. Nathan did not move. Clara, who had come in from the porch with frost on her hat brim, watched Evelyn without judgment. That was why Evelyn liked her. Some people heard no as an insult. Clara heard it as information. Nathan said quietly, "May I ask why?" Evelyn laughed once, not happily. "Because I am tired." The room did not know what to do with that. Tired was supposed to be temporary, solved by sleep, coffee, a Sunday afternoon with shoes off. Evelyn's tired was older. It lived in the wrists, the back, the careful way she counted money before buying stamps, the breath she took before climbing stairs to a room no one visiting the ranch had ever been shown. She set the facts on the table. "I am tired of saving things men are paid to ruin. I am tired of being useful in emergencies and invisible at supper. I am tired of knowing every hinge and every sorrow and still having to prove I belong on a floor I have mopped for 11 years. I am tired of people calling it kindness when they offer me responsibility without asking whether I have any strength left to receive it." Silence settled, not offended but chastened. Nathan's face changed with each sentence, and Evelyn knew he had expected hesitation, maybe modesty, maybe fear. He had not expected the truth to arrive without shoes. Atlas opened one eye. Rosa began to cry softly, but not from disappointment. Recognition did that to people. Luke whispered, "I am sorry." Evelyn looked at him. "You are not the only man in the world, Luke. Do not take more guilt than you earned. That is vanity in a hair shirt." Mason slowly sat down as if the chair had suggested humility. "You are right," he said. "The offer as I framed it was another burden." Nathan stepped into the kitchen, careful with his injured side. "I am sorry." Evelyn lifted one hand. "You apologize too quickly. Let the lesson finish chewing." He stopped. That she appreciated. Men rarely stopped when corrected in front of others. Nathan did. Clara took off her hat and set it on the sideboard. "What would make it not a burden?" Evelyn looked at her. "What?" Clara repeated. "What would make the role fair? Not flattering. Fair." The question entered the room and rearranged it. Evelyn had been prepared to refuse a crown made of chores. She had not been prepared to design justice. She looked at Rosa, who was holding a dish towel in both hands. "Rosa gets paid properly, not favor money, wages, with records, health coverage for Mateo if the foundation can do that without making her feel owned." Nathan nodded. "Done." Rosa covered her mouth. Evelyn turned to Luke. "Luke gets work that uses what he knows and support for what he carries. No man should be left alone with shame and a hammer. He can oversee repairs if he wants it, but not because guilt chains him here." Luke's eyes filled. "I want it." "Then say it like a man asking for work, not punishment." He straightened. "I want the repair job." "Better." She looked at Mason. "Every hand who stays signs a wage agreement they can understand, not one of your paper quilts." Mason nodded. "Plain language. The East Ridge is protected, not just Daniel's Cross, the whole rise. A place for any worker, veteran, or family who needs to remember someone. No selling it to men with shoes shinier than their souls." Mason wrote quickly. "Memorial easement. We can structure it." Evelyn pointed at him. "English later." "Yes, ma'am." Nathan's expression had changed from apology to something steadier. He was listening like a man building a bridge in real time. "What else?" he asked. Evelyn looked at Atlas under the table. "The ranch takes in retired working dogs when it can. Not too many, not for show, and not if we cannot care for them right. Real care. Warm beds, vet visits, purpose if they wanted, and naps if they earned them." Nathan's eyes shone. "That was my hope."
Hope needs a feed budget. It will have one, and I am not sleeping above the pantry. The sentence came out sharper than she expected. Everyone went very still. Evelyn felt heat rise in her face and old shame trying to make shelter out of silence. She pushed through it. If you want me to keep a ranch alive, I get a room with a window that opens, a chair that fits my back, and a door no man can take from me because his temper had a long night. Rosa put a hand over her heart. Clara looked down, blinking once. Mason wrote without looking up. Nathan's voice was quiet. You get the main house. Evelyn stared. Do not be ridiculous. I am not. Cedar Draw's main house has represented Clifford's power. That needs to change. If you serve as operator, the office becomes administration, the dining room becomes common space, and you have private quarters downstairs or wherever you choose. Not charity. Governance. Evelyn eyed him. That sounded rehearsed. I have spent years trying to turn buildings that held bad memories into places where people can breathe. The words come easier than the work. She believed him. That annoyed her slightly. And you? She asked. Where do you fit in your own generous architecture? He looked down at Atlas, then toward the window where Daniel's Ridge lay beyond sight. I do not own Cedar Draw because I want another asset. The foundation can own the ranch in trust. Brooks Sentinel can provide capital and legal support. I can serve as board chair and be here during transition, but the daily authority belongs to the person who knows the land and has earned trust. That sounds like me again. It is you if you choose it. Evelyn sat down slowly. Atlas lifted his head and placed it on her knee. She stroked his fur without thinking. The room waited. This time the waiting was not pressure, it was respect, and respect felt strange enough that she needed a moment to identify it. She thought of the pantry room, the empty frame she had left on the Cotha Ridge cross with Mateo's scarf, Daniel's line in Nathan's pocket, Rosa's notebook under flour, Luke's ledger under smoke, Clara's steady badge, Mason's muddy boots, Nathan's gray-blue eyes when he said, "Neither was I." She thought of Clifford saying habit was not value. Perhaps he had been right in the way cruel men sometimes accidentally pointed at truth while aiming elsewhere. Habit was not value. Work done cheaply was not belonging. A roof offered by a tyrant was not home. I will not be made into a saint for opening a barn door, she said. Nathan nodded. Good. People do that. They make old women holy so they do not have to pay them. Rosa let out a startled laugh through tears. Mason said, that should be printed in several boardrooms. Evelyn continued, I will take the role for 90 days, temporary, with pay, with authority written plainly, with Clara, or whoever the law allows checking that no one buries nonsense in the fine print. After 90 days we decide with clear eyes whether I remain, whether Rosa or Luke or someone else takes more responsibility, and whether this ranch can be what you say it can be. Nathan's shoulders eased. Yes. Mason looked almost relieved enough to hug a document. I can draft that immediately. Clara said, I will review it for plain sense, though I am not your attorney. You are the only person here who scares paper, Evelyn said. Clara accepted this as a compliment. The kitchen exhaled. Rosa crossed the room and embraced Evelyn carefully, as if afraid the older woman might refuse comfort on principle. Evelyn did not refuse. She held Rosa with one arm and kept the other hand on Atlas's head. Luke wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and pretended it was smoke left over from the shed. Mateo wandered in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and asked, Is Miss Evelyn the captain now? Nathan looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Atlas. Atlas looked at the biscuit jar. Not captain, Evelyn said. Temporary operator. Mateo frowned. That is not as good, Mason said. It has legal precision. Mateo stared at him. Captain is better. Evelyn sighed. Fine. Kitchen captain until noon. After that, we revisit titles. The boy grinned. The laughter that followed was quiet, worn out, and real. By mid-morning, Cedar Draw had become a parade of official vehicles. Federal investigators arrived with insulated boots, evidence cases, and the solemn optimism of people who believe forms can chase wrongdoing across state lines if filled out properly. A veterinarian from Livingston came to examine Atlas and declared him stubborn, under-rested, and likely to recover well with proper care. Evelyn said she could have provided that diagnosis for free. Nathan submitted to a doctor's evaluation after Atlas refused to leave the guest room doorway until he did. Rosa's notebook was copied. Luke's ledger was sealed. Malcolm Voss was transported under state supervision. Clifford from town tried through his lawyer to claim he had been misled by everyone, including the weather. Clara enjoyed that less than Evelyn enjoyed hearing about it. Through it all, Evelyn moved from kitchen to office to barn with a clipboard Mason had given her and a pencil she trusted more than his pen. She made lists. Hay inventory, payroll names, veterinary needs, broken latches, feed accounts, worker housing repairs, a new lock for the pantry room, not because she planned to sleep there, but because no room should be unable to choose privacy. The ranch hands came to her one by one, some embarrassed, some hopeful, some simply unsure where to stand. She did not forgive everyone at once. Forgiveness, she believed, was not a bucket to dump over a yard so everyone could call mud clean. It was a road, and some people had not yet put on boots. Briggs came last, eyes red from his statement hat crushed in his hands. "Ms. Parker, I do not expect to stay." "Good," she said. He nodded, accepting it. "I understand. No, I mean good that you do not expect. Expectations make men lazy. Do you want to ask?" He looked up. "Can I stay and make it right? Not near the North Road, not near records, not with trust you have not earned. You can start with mucking stalls and telling Clara everything twice." Relief and shame crossed his face together. "Yes, ma'am. And no laughing at Wade's jokes in memory." His mouth trembled. "No, ma'am." Luke watched from the barn door and gave Evelyn a small nod. Repair was beginning awkward and unpretty. That was how repair usually began. Near noon, Mason gathered everyone in the dining room, now stripped of Clifford's chair at the head. The table had been turned sideways, as Luke had done the night before, so no one sat like a king. The plain language agreement was read aloud. Evelyn Parker would serve as interim operator of Cedar Draw Ranch for 90 days paid, at a fair salary, housed in the main residence, supported by Brooks Sentinel and the Brooks Canine Recovery Foundation. The East Ridge would be protected, pending memorial easement. Workers would receive wage review. The ranch would transition toward a rehabilitation and working ranch model for veterans, retired working dogs, and honest cattle operations. It sounded almost too large to fit in the room. Evelyn signed with her full name slowly because her hands shook, and because she wanted Daniel to see every letter from wherever mothers hoped sons could see. Nathan signed after her. Mason witnessed. Clara watched. Rosa cried again and stopped apologizing for it. Atlas placed one paw on Evelyn's boot during the entire signing, as if adding canine authority. Mateo whispered, "Captain." Evelyn whispered back, "Temporary." "Captain," he insisted, "we will discuss your insubordination after lunch." The day might have softened there, but stories rarely obey human hunger. In the early afternoon, Clara received a call from town. Clifford Hayes had agreed to provide information on the wider network in exchange for consideration, but he demanded to speak to Evelyn first. Nathan immediately said no. Clara said it was Evelyn's choice. Mason advised caution. Rosa looked horrified. Luke looked angry. Atlas, who did not understand legal strategy but understood tone, stood and came to Evelyn's side. Evelyn looked out the dining room window toward the ranch yard. Clifford had taken her wages, her room, her dignity in public, and nearly the memorial ridge. He had refused mercy to Nathan and Atlas, not because he lacked water, but because he lacked reverence for life without status. She did not owe him an audience.
Mercy did not mean handing cruel men the keys to your peace. But if he truly had information that could protect others, she could listen with Clara present and the door open.
"I will speak to him," she said. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Evelyn." She turned to him. "Do you trust me?" He stopped. The question returned to him from the barn, from the loose board, from every moment he had asked her to hold danger carefully. "Yes." "Then trust me with a conversation." Clara arranged the call on speaker in Clifford's office with Nathan seated nearby under protest, Mason taking notes, and Atlas lying across the doorway like a furry injunction. Clifford's voice came through, thin and smaller than before. "Evelyn." She sat straight. "Mr. Hayes, I hear they put you in charge. Temporarily." A bitter laugh. "You will find it harder than biscuits." "Most things are." Silence. Then Clifford said, "Voss has records beyond Cedar Draw. A storage unit outside Bozeman. He kept insurance, names, payments, photos of trucks. If I give it, maybe they go easier." Clara leaned forward, writing. Evelyn said, "Tell Deputy Whitcomb. I wanted you to know I had reasons." The room chilled. Evelyn looked at the phone as if Clifford sat inside it, smaller than a trapped fly. "No. You had pressures. Reasons are what people use to stay human under pressure. You chose something else." Clifford breathed harshly. "You think you are better than me?" "No," she said. "I think I was tempted to become smaller, and some days I did. I muttered, I judged, I hid in work because hope felt expensive. But when a man and a dog were lying in the snow, I knew what size my soul had to be for 5 minutes. That is all any of us get sometimes. 5 minutes to be the person God has been trying to make." No one in the office moved. Clifford said nothing. At last he gave Clara the location of the storage unit. The call ended without farewell. Evelyn sat back, emptied by the effort. Nathan looked at her with something deeper than admiration now. 5 minutes, he said softly. Sometimes that is the mission. She nodded. Outside the office window, Atlas suddenly lifted his head. A familiar sound rolled into the yard, not threatening this time, but strange. A cattle truck escorted by state vehicles was coming through the gate. Clara stepped to the window. "Recovered cattle," she said. "They are bringing some back for identification." Ranch hands began moving toward the pens. Luke grabbed his coat. Rosa called for Mateo to stay inside. Evelyn stood, weariness forgotten. Cedar Draw's stolen life was coming home in pieces. Then one of the investigators ran toward the office waving a paper. "Miss Parker, Mr. Brooks, you need to see this. One of the recovered animals carries an old Cedar Draw brand, altered over a second mark. This may prove Clifford started stealing from his own ranch hands years before the current operation." Evelyn looked at Nathan, then toward the yard where the truck brakes sighed in the cold. The ranch had more ghosts to count before it could be clean. The recovered cattle came back to Cedar Draw Ranch in slow, uneasy groups, not like a parade of victory, but like tired witnesses returning to a courthouse made of snow and fence rails. Evelyn Parker stood beside the loading pen with Nathan Brooks, Deputy Clara Whitcomb, Luke Harper, Rosa Martinez, Mateo, Mason Reed, 3 federal investigators, 2 state officers, and Atlas, who had appointed himself inspector of everything with hooves. The air smelled of cold metal hay and the sour nervousness of animals that had been moved too many times by people who cared more for paperwork than breathing creatures. Evelyn did not let herself imagine the worst of what they had endured. That helped no one. She focused on what could be done now. Water, quiet voices, open space, hands that did not rush. Luke moved through the pens with surprising gentleness, reading brands, old scars, ear tags, and habits the way some men read psalms. One dun cow came off the truck and stopped dead at the gate, refusing to move until Atlas sat down several yards away and looked in the opposite direction, as if pretending not to supervise. The cow considered this courtesy, then stepped forward. Mateo whispered, "Atlas speaks cow." Evelyn said, "Atlas speaks authority. Cows are fluent." Nathan smiled, though exhaustion shadowed him. The doctor from Livingston had ordered rest, proper meals, and less hero behavior. Evelyn had repeated those orders loudly enough for 3 rooms. Nathan obeyed some of them, which she considered progress from a difficult student. As the investigators checked the altered brands, the story became worse in ways that were not dramatic, only sad. Clifford had not merely hidden stolen cattle from neighboring ranches. Years earlier, when Cedar Draw hands had been paid partly in small livestock shares or promised breeding rights, he had shifted records, absorbed animals into ranch accounts, and told men market losses had wiped out what they were owed. The theft had been quiet, legal-looking, and cruel in the slow way of rot. Several former hands would need to be found. Families might be repaid. Some could not be. Clara said restitution would take time. Mason said time with documents was better than silence without them. Evelyn said both of them could discuss that after lunch, because righteous work also needed sandwiches. By evening, the ranch had a new list on the kitchen wall, titled Things to Set Right. Evelyn wrote it in pencil and underlined nothing because underlining made lists look smug. Payback wages, protect ridge, repair east gate, review herd claims, hire veterinarian monthly, replace pantry lock, establish canine recovery stalls, fix bunkhouse heat, find former workers. Bake more biscuits, Atlas added by placing his nose directly under the line until Mateo wrote it in crooked letters. Evelyn tried to erase it. Atlas objected with one paw on her boot. Nathan sided with the dog. This, Evelyn announced, was how corruption began. A month later, Cedar Draw no longer looked like the same ranch, though the mountains had not moved and the wind still found every weak seam in a coat. The sign at the gate had been taken down, sanded, and repainted by Luke's own hands. It now read Mercy Draw Ranch. Under the name, in smaller letters, Mason had argued over for 2 full afternoons was written Working Ranch and Canine Recovery Home. Evelyn thought the phrase sounded too official, but Mateo liked it because it had canine in it, and Atlas had licked the wet paint before anyone could stop him, leaving one faint mark near the corner. Evelyn refused to repaint that corner. Every institution needs a flaw honest enough to show, she said. Mason wrote that down and claimed it was for governance philosophy. It is paint, she told him. Do not put a tie on it. The main house changed first. Clifford's office became a shared administration room with 2 desks, one for ranch accounts and one for foundation work. The elk head was removed and given to a wildlife education center after Mateo declared it looked tired of listening to men lie. The dining room table stayed turned sideways and no chair returned to the old head position. Rosa became kitchen and stores manager, with wages in writing a health plan for Mateo and keys that opened doors no one could threaten to close. She still cried sometimes when pay envelopes arrived correctly, though she had become fierce enough to scold Mason for using too many words in supply forms. Luke took charge of repairs and training. He fixed the east gate properly, then hung the old wrong latch above his workbench as a reminder that small compromises were still compromises. Briggs stayed mucking stalls, speaking to investigators, and accepting every unpleasant job without complaint. Trust did not rush toward him, but it did not turn its back forever either. The recovered cattle were sorted. Some returned to neighboring ranches. Some remained under legal hold, and some belonged to families who had long since moved away. Evelyn insisted each claim be handled with patience. If we are going to repair theft, she told the investigators, we will not do it at Gallup. They listened partly because Clara had quietly informed them that not listening to Evelyn tended to create extra work. Daniels Ridge became the heart of the ranch in a way Evelyn had not expected and had not entirely approved at first. Mason arranged the memorial easement, plain language version, and legal version both, and the 3 pines were fenced lightly, not to keep people out, but to keep vehicles away. Nathan added a simple bench made from reclaimed barnwood. Luke carved the names of Daniel Parker and several local veterans into small cedar markers, leaving room for others. Evelyn objected that the place was becoming too formal. Rosa told her sometimes grief liked a clean bench. Evelyn had no answer to that which Rosa enjoyed more than was charitable. On the first Sunday after the easement was signed, Pastor Glenn from Livingston came to bless the ridge. He prayed without shouting, which Evelyn appreciated. Mateo tied a fresh red scarf around Daniel's cross. Atlas sat beside the bench with his injured leg healed enough to bear weight properly, though he still used a limp when sympathy biscuits were visible. Nathan stood apart at first, hands in his coat pockets, eyes on the mountains. Evelyn went to him. "You are doing that thing." "What thing?" "Standing where you can leave quickly." He looked down, caught. "Habit. Habit is not a jail, unless you keep paying rent." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like yours, not Daniel's." "I do occasionally produce original material." He looked toward the ridge. "I do not know how to stay." "Most people do not. They confuse staying with never leaving. Staying can mean returning when you say you will." Nathan took that in. Atlas, bored with philosophy, leaned against Evelyn and nearly knocked her sideways. "Careful, Sergeant Biscuit." Nathan laughed. He laughed more easily now, though not carelessly. The nightmares had not vanished. Evelyn was too old for stories where pain disappeared because paperwork resolved. Some nights, Nathan walked the porch until dawn, Atlas beside him, the two of them moving through memories Evelyn did not ask to enter. Sometimes she left coffee on the rail and said nothing. Sometimes he came to the kitchen and read one line from Daniel's letter, not more, one line at a time because grief and trust both preferred small servings. In return, Evelyn told him about Daniel as a boy, how he once tried to baptize barn cats in a washtub and emerged with theology scratched across both arms, how he believed burnt toast was acceptable if covered with enough butter, how he once planted navy beans in her flower bed because he thought a Marine's mother should grow a navy. Nathan listened, as if every ridiculous detail mattered. Perhaps it did. Under his direction, the first retired working dogs arrived at Mercy Draw near the end of the month. Not many, 3 to start. A black German shepherd named Duke with cloudy eyes, a tan and black female named Scout who disliked men in hats until Luke earned her trust by ignoring her respectfully, and a thick-coated sable named Ranger who adopted Rosa's kitchen door as his personal weather station. Atlas met them like an officer receiving late paperwork. He corrected Ranger's enthusiasm with one stern look, allowed Scout space, and lay beside Duke in the sun without demanding conversation. Evelyn watched from the porch with a cup of coffee warming both hands. "He knows," Nathan said beside her. "Knows what? What it is like to come home and still feel on duty." Evelyn looked at Atlas in the yard. "Then give him work that does not eat him alive." Nathan nodded. "That is the plan. Plans are cute. Budgets are where virtue gets weighed. The budget is approved. I will believe it when Mason stops sweating over feed invoices." Mason passing below the porch with a folder called, "I heard that." "Good. Saves postage." The ranch hands began calling Evelyn Captain, despite her repeated objections. Mateo started it. Rosa encouraged it. Luke used it once by accident, and then pretended it was official terminology. Nathan never used it unless he wanted to annoy her, which meant he used it just enough. She remained interim operator after the first 90 days became more than a formality. At the review meeting held at the sideways dining table, Mason presented clean accounts, Rosa presented stores inventory, Luke presented repair progress, Nathan presented the foundation plan, Clara, attending unofficially with pie, reported that prosecutions were moving forward, and Evelyn presented a list titled, "Reasons This Is Still Too Much Trouble." It had 12 items. The 13th, written by Mateo at the bottom, said, Because Captain Evelyn likes us but is stubborn. Atlas placed his paw on the paper. The vote was considered unanimous. Evelyn agreed to remain for a year, not forever. She refused forever on principle. Forever belongs to God and fence repairs, she said. And even fence repairs are optimistic. The happy ending did not come as a golden carriage or a deed handed over like a fairy tale. It came in direct deposits that arrived on time. It came in the bunkhouse furnace working through a cold snap. It came in Rosa sleeping a full night because Mateo's medicine was paid. It came in Luke teaching Briggs how to mend a hinge without hiding from what he had done. It came in Nathan leaving for 3 days and returning on the 4th because he had said he would. It came in Atlas trotting without a limp across the yard one bright morning, then remembering Evelyn was watching and adding the limp back for sympathy. "Fraud," she called. The dog wagged his tail. It came in Daniel's ridge, where the red scarf faded under sun and wind until Mateo replaced it with a new one each month. On the first true spring morning, when snowmelt ran silver along the creek and the valley smelled of thawed earth, Evelyn carried the peppermint tin to the ridge. Nathan walked with her. Atlas ranged ahead, checking the path. The 3 new dogs followed with varying degrees of dignity. Rosa and Mateo came behind with a basket of breakfast rolls. Luke brought a small cedar marker for a former hand whose family had been found in Idaho and repaid. Mason arrived late, muddy and offended by nature. Clara came on horseback because she said trucks made too much noise for a morning like that. They gathered without ceremony. Evelyn opened the tin and looked inside. Daniel's letters, the brass button, the copied line Nathan had kept. Atlas's tag returned after evidence processing and polished just enough. The dried bean from the barn rail. She took the bean out and pressed it into the soil at the base of Daniel's cross. "You came home," she whispered. Nathan stood beside her, eyes wet and unhidden. "Who?" he asked softly. Evelyn looked at the ranch below, the repaired gates, the moving cattle, the dogs in the yard, the kitchen chimney breathing smoke, Rosa laughing at something Mateo said, Luke pretending not to enjoy Mason's city complaints, Clara sitting tall in the saddle, Atlas watching all of them as if responsible for the horizon. "All of us, I think." Nathan nodded. Atlas came back and placed his head beneath Evelyn's hand. She scratched between his ears. "Yes, you too, Sergeant Biscuit." The dog leaned harder. "Do not milk it." The sun rose above the mountains, then turning the wet grass gold. Evelyn felt the warmth on her face and realized the door inside her, the one grief had closed quietly years ago, had not swung open all at once. It had opened inch by inch, through a barn door, a biscuit, a hidden tag, a ridge in the snow, a boy's old sentence, and a wounded man who kept coming back. She did not feel young. She did not need to. She felt present. That was better. Later that morning she returned to the barn where it had all begun. The broken hinge had been fixed. Clean straw lay in the stall. Sunlight poured through the open doors. Evelyn stood at the threshold with her coffee and left the doors wide, though the breeze carried a chill. Nathan came beside her. "Aren't you cold?" he asked. "A little. Want me to close them?" She looked at Atlas lying in a square of sun surrounded by retired dogs while Mateo read to them from a school book and Rosa scolded everyone for tracking mud. Evelyn smiled. "No. Leave them open. You never know who God is walking up the road." Nathan said nothing, but his shoulder brushed hers gently. The ranch breathed around them, not perfect, not free of debt to the past, but alive in a way Clifford's fear had never allowed. Cedar Draw Ranch had not been saved because a powerful man bought paper. It had been saved because an old woman opened a door when closing it would have been easier. Because a dog trusted the smell of kindness. Because frightened people told the truth before courage felt comfortable. And because sometimes The smallest prayer on a windowsill waits all night for the morning to prove it was heard. Sometimes the Lord sends help in a form we do not expect. It may come as a tired neighbor, a loyal dog, a stranger with quiet eyes, or an old woman who has been overlooked for so long that people forget heaven still sees her clearly. Evelyn did not change Mercy Draw Ranch because she was rich, young, or powerful. She changed it because for 5 important minutes, she chose mercy over fear. We may not be asked to save a ranch, but every day gives us smaller doors to open. We can speak kindly when someone is ashamed, tell the truth when silence feels safer, forgive without becoming foolish, and protect what is sacred even when others call it useless. If this story touched your heart, comment Amen and share it with someone who needs courage today. May God bless your home, guard your loved ones, comfort every grieving heart, and remind you that no act of mercy is ever wasted.